Good morning. My name is Councillor Jennifer McKelvey. I am Chair of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I'd like to now call meeting 25 to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held with members of council and city staff participating by video conference. The public can continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. These measures are necessary to comply with public health guidelines and prevent the spread of COVID-19. The clerk staff have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Infrastructure and Environment Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I ask for everyone's patience if we experience any delays or technical problems during the meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda material on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff will be available to you remotely if you need help with your devices. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. I will create a speakers list and I will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask that members ensure that they keep their video on and to raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you that you must still submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at iec@toronto.ca to help with your motions. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic and indicate the item, number, and the nature of the interest. Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes of our meeting on September 14th, 2021? Deputy Mayor Min Wong, all those in favor? Opposed? That item carries. Thank you. We have 20 items listed on our agenda this morning, and I understand that we also have 3 walk-on items from Councillor Perruzza, Councillor Cole, and I will be moving one on behalf of Councillor Carroll. We'll introduce these so that they can display onto the clerk's meeting portal, but after vote on their introduction, and then we can vote on the items later. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Carroll's motion on phasing out gas-powered leaf blowers for municipal use. I'm happy to introduce the item, and then it can be displayed. All those in favor? Okay, just voting on introduction. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item is introduced. The next item is by Councillor Cole, improving cycling and pedestrian safety on the York Beltline Trail and Kay Gardner Beltline Trail. Councillor Cole, would you like to move this onto the agenda?
Yes, I so move.
Okay. Okay, just voting on the introduction. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item is now introduced. Councillor Perruzza, I understand you have an item to introduce as well?
I do, Madam Chair.
Okay. Again, just voting on the introduction right now. All those in favor? All those in favor? All those opposed? That item is introduced. Okay, that brings us to the order paper item IE 25.1, amendment to purchase order number 605.
No. Madam Chair, I had another one. There's another one around the laneways and management of laneways.
Okay, the clerks are not aware of that. Oh, hold on one moment. We'll check.
They would have gotten it early this morning. I apologize.
Okay, we'll go through the order paper while they're preparing that, and we can introduce it then. Okay, item IE 25.1, amendment to purchase order number 6052180 with WSP Canada Incorporated for the construction of multiple culverts at various locations. Anybody like to hold this item? Somebody move the item?
I'll move the staff recommendations.
Councillor Layton, all those in favor? All those opposed? Seeing none, that item carries. IE 25.2, amendment to purchase order number 6047920, tender call number 257-2018 to OJCR Construction Limited for repairs of sewer service connections, catch basins, and appurtenances for various locations, Toronto, East York, Scarborough districts. Anybody like to hold the item? Somebody like to move the item? Councillor Layton, all those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.3, award of request for quotation Ariba document number 30477177744 to GFL Environmental Incorporated for curbside collection services in Etobicoke Area District 1. Would anybody like to hold the item?
Could we hold that, please?
Okay. That item is held. IE 25.4, non-competitive contract with Evoquia Water Technologies Limited for the purchase of proprietary essential parts for maintenance of all process equipment at water treatment plants. Would anybody like to hold the item? Somebody like to move the item? You're moving it? Okay, great. Councillor Layton's moving it. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.5, non-competitive contract with Forest Ontario to implement the Tree Seed Diversity Program 2022 to 2031 for parks, forestry, and recreation. Anybody like to hold the item? Seeing none, would somebody like to move the item? Councillor Cole, would you like to move the item? Thank you. I know you like your trees. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.6, non-competitive contract with IBI Group Professional Services Canada Incorporated for the support and maintenance, graphic user interface enhancements, and control strategy component upgrades of the transmission operations optimizer proprietary system software. Anybody like to hold the item? Anybody move the item?
Sorry, which Zach? I'm kidding.
IE 25.6, would you like to hold it or move it?
I'd like to hold it just so you're going to have to call it out again.
Okay,
No,
Councillor, Deputy Mayor is moving the item, I believe. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item is carried. IE 25.7, non-competitive contract amendment to demand response agreement with Rodan Energy Solutions Incorporated. Would anybody like to hold the item? Somebody like to move the item? Councillor Cole's moving it. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.8, litigation arising from North Toronto Wastewater Treatment Plant combined sewer overflow tank implementation of hydraulic improvements in high rate treatment project request for proposal 9117067403. Would anybody like to hold the item? Somebody move the item. Councillor Layton, all those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.9, construction staging 75 Broadway Avenue. Anybody like to hold the item? Somebody move the item. Councillor Cole, all those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.10, I will hold. There is one deputation. IE 20.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
It's Stephen Holiday. I'm visiting today, and I just want to let you know I'm also here for that item, and I will be asking a question of staff.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you for joining us today. And sorry, I don't think I read the item on that one. So that is the Centennial Park Master Plan. IE 25.11, improving winter access to Toronto's parks for 2021 to 2022. We have one deputant, so I will hold that item. IE 25.12, Riverdale Park East Top of Bank improvements. Would anybody like to hold this item? Somebody like to move the item? Councillor Layton's moving it. All those in favor? Opposed? That item carries. IE 25.13, analysis of the viability of introducing a water and sewer line warranty program for the City of Toronto and its residents. Would anybody like to hold the item? Seeing none, would somebody like to move the item? Deputy Mayor is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That item carries. IE 2514.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just my recollection is that's received for information, correct?
I will double check. I believe it is. We can
Yeah,
just pull it up.
thank you, that's fine. Great.
Sorry, bear with me. I will double check. That City Council received a report for information. Confirmed.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
IE 25.14 Lakeshore Boulevard East Bridge in Public Realm Project, Don River to Carlaw Avenue Traffic Mitigation Outreach Update. Would somebody like to move the item? Councillor Layton's moving. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 25.15 Non-Motorized Watercraft Opportunities in the Outer Harbour. I will hold as there is one deputant. IE 2516 Winford Drive Light Rail Transit Station Elevator Cost Estimate. Would somebody like to hold the item? Would somebody like to move the item? Deputy Mayor is moving the item. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 2517 Creating the East Toronto Rail Path. I will hold as there are 4 deputants. IE 2518 Adopt a Road Pilot Program. Are there any questions? Anybody like to hold the item? Okay, somebody like to move the item? This is the item introduced by Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Cole is moving. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. IE 2518 Adopt a Road, oops, sorry, I just did that one. Okay, IE 2519 Galloway Road Bike Lanes Upgrades. I have a amendment. So this is the item that was recommended by Councillor Ainsley. It's just moving that this report comes back in December 2021 with the existing cycling network plan program report that's coming to us, just to streamline the reporting.
Thumbs up from Paul.
Okay, anybody like to hold the item or speak to the item? Okay, I'm happy to move that. All those in favor? Opposed? That item carries. IE 2520 Scarborough Cycling Report. We have 2 deputants, so I will hold that item. That brings us back to our items that were walked on. Are we ready with Councillor Peruzza's additional? So we're going to introduce Councillor Peruzza's new item.
There it is, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll vote just on introduction.
Sure.
Okay, just voting to introduce. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's introduced. The items that we just introduced, unless anybody wants to hold, so we need to hold IE 25.21, phasing out of gas-powered leaf blowers, because there is a deputant on that item. Okay, apologies. Okay, IE 25.21, phasing out of gas leaf blowers. There are no deputants. We can vote on this item now if the wish of the committee, or if you need more time, let me know. Is everybody okay to vote on this one now? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. Thank you, Councillor Carroll, for joining us today and for introducing that item. The next one is the 2522, which we have to hold as there is a deputant. That's Councillor Cole's item that he introduced. And then the revisiting permits for utility companies to rectify safety issues at job sites. We can vote on that one now if everybody's ready. Any issues with that? We'll vote on it now. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. We still need some time to continue processing the new item from Councillor Perruzza, so we'll have to vote on that one at the end of the meeting. Okay, that brings us back to our regularly scheduled program, IE 25.3, award of request for quotation to rebid document number 30477177744 to GFL Environmental Incorporated for curbside collection. Deputy Mayor, you held the item. Would you like to ask questions of staff? Or Councillor Layton held it, either or?
Sorry, is curbside collection fully supportive of the contract?
Okay, questions of
I think
staff?
it was me. I think it was Councillor Layton.
Councillor Layton
He and I
held
would
it?
Probably respectfully disagree on this one.
I've got some questions of staff.
Okay, great. So we'll move to questions of staff. Councillor Layton, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. The cost escalations of the report, they're quite significant, the increases over the next, like, year over year. Can you talk us through what's driving the cost increases? And whoa, our City Hall screen's looking really trippy on mine. Has everyone seen that?
No.
There, done. It's fixed. Thanks.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, the cost escalations are due to the cost of labor, the cost of materials, and just the general cost of operating the business from the contractor's perspective with regards to consumer price index changes year over year.
Are we seeing that in our other contract?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, yes, all of our contracts have escalation clauses. Generally, they relate to consumer price index across all collection contracts as well as processing.
Can you compare the escalations with between Area 1 and Area 2?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, the cost escalations are CPI, and just when we're looking at the cost of District 1, which is this contract in front of you today, when we look at the current cost of the program today with the contractor, if that price was to be increased by CPI, the contract that's being awarded today would actually be $100,000 cheaper on a cost comparison basis when the contract starts. So it does provide value for money compared to the existing contract cost today for District 1.
How does the cost escalations in this contract compare with the cost escalations that we're experiencing in our own divisions where the city's collecting?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, the costs in this contract are linked explicitly to consumer price index, as well as the amount and the volume of materials that are put to the curb. So the more materials that are put, the more the city pays to have that material collected, which again, with our reduce, reuse, recycle push and initiative, the more that those materials don't end up at the curb, the less expensive it is for our contracts. On the city side, we have collective agreement requirements with regards to the cost escalation of our salaries and benefits, as well as the purchasing of vehicles, which right now is a very tight market with lots of competition to get those vehicles, as well as fuel and other rents and services. So when we look at it comparatively, we use CPI in our overall rate projections and our cost projections on the east side, similar to our contracted costs in the west.
Can we talk about performance in the contract? Could we let's look at some of the measurements. So complaints, how do they compare area to area?
So, Councillor, that's something that I'd have to take back and get you some more information on. I didn't bring complaints on collections with me today, but I can certainly get you that information for council, not a problem. And we're looking at this is a GFL, which is a new contractor for District 1. Although they do have our District 2 contract, we can definitely do some compare and contrast on the number of 311 calls that have come in over the past couple of years for you for council.
So what about diversion rates? Are they different in different areas of the city?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, I'd say, diversion, we don't measure diversion in different areas of the city. That specifically, to be honest, we look at diversion on a city-wide basis. And ultimately, diversion is not the contractor's job. Their job is to pick up material that's diverted by residents at the house. So the residents are the ones that really drive the diversion, not the contractors.
So do we have division rate district to district?
No, we do not have diversion rates district to district. We have diversion rates with our curbside collection customers as well as our multi-residential customers.
Okay. Can they be broken down district to district or no?
Councillor, I don't believe so, but that's something that I will check with staff and determine.
I believe in 2017 we have this data. So I'm concerned that this is a pretty big measure of whether or not a contractor has succeeded, and I'll tell you why. Having sat in my small cubicle of an office overlooking my street for the past 2 years, I've tended to notice when the garbage trucks go by, and we're in District 2, more times than not, both the green and the black and the green and the blue end up in the same, getting flipped into the same compartment. So I know that it's a concern. And I do know that we check to see what the contamination rate is of the contracted areas in District 1 and District 2. I imagine we do the same for District 3 and District 4. How does the contamination rates compare?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, the contamination rates are fairly consistent across the city. Again, there are some outliers, as you can imagine, just with certain large buildings compared to curbside. But one of the pieces that we need to make sure that is clear is diversion is done by the resident. It's not by the customer. It's not done by the contractor. The contractor.
You'll have to excuse me if they're putting the bins in the wrong compartment.
Last question.
And mixing it. If they're contaminating it, that is their responsibility. My last question is, I sent you a picture the other day of a truck, a GFL truck in District 2 that said on the sign, "Please separate your paper and your glass." And that's because this truck was from a different city and GFL was using it on our streets. What has happened in that case? And can you give me details of if this is allowed or what penalties there are for such behavior? Because it was communicating the wrong thing to our residents, and this vehicle was from another municipality.
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, as you can imagine, there are breakdowns and challenges with vehicles and fleet from time to time. And when we were notified of this by you, I was in contact with staff, and that was rectified immediately. And those billboards were pulled down from that vehicle. There are some challenges, and being a large fleet operation, contractors do have very minor flexibility in adjusting the trucks that come in to service the areas in any given day, with advance notice, of course, to staff, and staff do monitor those vehicles. And ultimately, we want to make sure that the materials get off the street as quickly and efficiently as possible to provide that level of customer service. But there are, from time to time, replacement vehicles that do come in, and they cycle through the operation, and we monitor that quite a bit.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions of staff? Councillor Cole, and then Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Just again, so this contract is for how many years with the curbside pickup?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, it's for 5 years plus the option of 2 additional years.
And how much per year?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's approximately $10 million, and that increase is based on consumer price index, but also it's highly correlated to the amount of materials that are put by residents at the curb. So the less material, the less the contract.
So it's about $10 million per year over times 5. What's the total amount of the contract?
So the total amount of the contract, Councillor, is approximately $89 million over the duration of the contract. There's also some contingency that's built in, approximately $1 million each year for basement flooding or other incidences where we need to get more material collected than what we have forecasted within our projection. So we've built that in as a contingency plan as well. And we would only spend that if we needed to provide that higher level of service during those types of incidents.
So could you explain the difference here? It's 10 million per year. Why wouldn't it be 50 million plus contingency? How does it get from 50 million to 80 million?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, there's the approximately $10 million per year, plus that's inflated over the 5 years, plus the additional 2 years. And then with the additional contingency that's built in, that's where we get to the full cost. And it's in the report. I'm more than happy to sit with you and walk through each item just so that we can provide some more clarity. That helps.
Yeah, because it's hard to explain to the general public out there in terms of how we get from 10 million and how do the, you say inflation kicks in automatically? They get the above the $10 million every year?
So through you, Madam Chair, yes, that's correct, Councillor. Inflation is adjusted based on the consumer price index. So if that increases, the cost of the contract increases. If it doesn't increase, then the contract doesn't increase as well. And the other mechanism in there as well is the more tonnage the city's growing, there's more people coming into the city. The more tonnage that's put at the curb, the more the contract will cost as well.
So therefore, if there's more garbage picked up, more recycling picked up, the contractor receives more money from the city. Is that right?
That's correct, Councillor.
And so how do you know whether that's caused by increased number of residents, greater density, or whether it's just in the fact that the same people are producing more waste?
So through you, Madam Chair, the Councillor, we track the number of residences within the respective communities. And so we know when there's more single family homes or more multi-residential tenants that are brought onto the system. We also look at the population within those areas as well. But we do not track that at like at a curbside level for each resident to determine how much they're putting out. We look at it, much more holistically and aggregated.
And what about the diversion rates? Given we've got good comparators now within different parts of the city, we have the city employees picking up garbage and recycling, and then we've got the private contractors. Can you get us for council a sort of breakdown of the various levels of diversion that occurs in the different areas?
So through you, Madam Chair, the Councillor, we don't track diversion rates specifically in each area, but what we can do is we will get back to you for council the most granular data that we have on diversion and get that to you for sure. Problem.
Yes, and in terms of 311 complaints, do we track how many 311 complaints we get between districts, between contractors?
Through you, Madam Chair, we track 311 complaints by ward, and we can certainly get a report on that if you would like to see that, or we can chat offline and walk you through.
No, I'd like to have that for next council just to compare, and so that we can let the public know what is happening with the garbage recycling, etc. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coyle. Deputy Mayor, 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few questions. In some ways, they might be rhetorical, but it's a bit of a refresher. The contract has to be 7 years because the contractor has to buy new trucks and amortize the cost of those trucks over the 7 years. So typically a contract would be 7 years. so it's economical for any service delivery to manage the cost of the rolling stock. Is that fair to say, Matt?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, Councillor. Vehicles typically last between 5 and 7 years, and most collection contracts are within that time frame.
So to make it fewer years, the contracts would be more expensive, or the contractor wouldn't be interested because the price, because they have to capture their cost.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, yes, that's speculation and then our understanding of how it would be structured by the contractors.
The second thing is with regard to inflation, and you say CPI index. So right now the fuel is at, has jumped $1.50 a liter, and it's going even higher. There has to be some way to capture that. That's why there are adjustments allowed, CPI adjustments. Is that a fair statement? That these companies need to be made whole, if for no other reason that there are certain costs that have to be built into, so that they can make what they assume that they were going to be making. Is that fair to say as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, the council, that's fair to say.
And so also, in those increases, all these contractors, or in this contract, my recollection was, I would assume it's the same thing, that these the awards to all these contractors, they're required to pay the fair to comply with fair wage policy. Is that fair to say as well?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's absolutely correct. Fair wage is applied to all of our contractors.
And in the event that wasn't there, potentially that private sector contractor might be able to come in at a lower price.
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps, but right now in the market, it's a employees game. There's especially in waste collection, skilled trades and skilled employees is becoming very difficult to attract and retain. So I want to speculate that fair wage would be if that wasn't there, costs would be lower. It's very competitive for our industry right now.
So what you're saying, in fact, is we're having to pay more to stay competitive.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, we pay what's in the collective agreement that's been agreed to by the city and the union. With regards to our contractors, they will and must pay what they need to pay in order to get the job done for the city. We will not pay more than what CPI has dictated within the contract, and no less than what fair wage policy has for those employees.
And I think this is my final question. With regard to diversion rates, a ton of organics, we pay the same amount, the contract at the same amount per ton for organics, recycling, and regular waste. At least this was the way when we negotiated the first contract. So there's not an incentive for the contractor to, for example, put more in one stream. So there's no real financial incentive for them to kind of tinker around, or at least not contaminate different streams, because they're not going to make any more money because it's the same amount per ton in each stream. Is that fair? Is that still the case?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, in this contract, recycling is actually a little bit cheaper per ton than organics and garbage, and part of that was the structuring of extended producer responsibility. But with extended producer responsibility, what we've been able to achieve in this contract is if the city decides that it does not want to continue collecting recyclables and processing recyclables, in this contract, there's a $0 break fee to stop recycling, which is extremely beneficial from a risk management side of the operation. So that's been built in as well to make sure that we reduce our costs and exposure to risk in 2023.
My recollection as well, there's an enforcement team that goes across all 4 districts to make sure that, or at least on the private sector side for sure, to make sure that there's not any sort of nonsense going on, and that is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We have contract compliance folks that drive the routes and document and manage the haulers. We also have hundreds of thousands of individuals with a 311 line and an email to solid waste if there's an issue as well. And we definitely get those when they do come in, as seen with one of Councillor Layton's issues, which we've been able to solve. So we not only encourage, we not only have staff on the road, but if residents also see some challenges with service provision, please feel free to call 311 and we will make that we address those immediately.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a few questions. Does anybody else have questions before I ask? Councillor Perruzza, 5 minutes.
Sure. So we've had a chance to have some experience with both the contracted services now and the in-house collection. How did the two compare? How does this contract compare to what our costs are by collecting waste with public employees?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, when we look at the contracts holistically in D1 and District 2 compared to District 3 and District 4, the number of homes serviced and the total budget and estimated cost is relatively the same for both the contracted side and the city side for the past couple of years. So that's has been our experience most recently.
Okay, so you're saying they're basically now at the same level, given the contract increases and that have come in, right? Because as you say, employees and retention and all of these other kinds of things, equipment costs and so on, right?
And through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, that's generally correct. Yes.
Okay, so if that trend continues in a few years' time, when this contract is done and we're going back out again, what's your view of that? Like, what's your opinion on that? What do you think is going to happen?
So through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, I won't speculate what could happen in the future. That's all at the discretion of council, providing direction to staff. What I can tell you.
No. I mean, in terms of the comparisons, in terms of the cost, like, what's your opinion? I mean, like, we all do that, right? We all sort of look at and say, well, how are things going, right? And you make decisions based on how you believe things are going to go, right? So, how do you believe things are going to go?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, it's a really difficult question to answer, given the tight labor markets, the challenges with fuel prices that we see right now. What we do have, though, is on the contracted side, we have firm commitments from those contractors with a fixed price to deliver the work that's linked to consumer price index. And on the staff side, we have flexibility with staff to augment different operations and a little bit more flexibility and resiliency with staff to be able to do other tasks if needed during certain instances. So there's pros and cons to both sides, and in terms of forecasting where the cost pressures will be in the future, I believe staffing pressures will be seen on both sides, but also fuel and vehicles as well.
And so, given that the cost now, the money value, in your view, is more or less the same, have you thought about it all, going back and expanding sort of the public collection, our sort of in-house collection of waste?
So through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, in all honesty, what we need to be able to do is forecast out the impacts of extended producer responsibility and understanding who will be doing that work, whether it will be the city continuing to do that for the producers, or if the producers will take over all recycling collection citywide. And then we would come back, of course, with a report on the future collection models within the city.
Okay. Okay. So just turning on to another subject, leaky trucks. My ward is kind of like at the end of the sort of the collection, because I'm close to the transfer station. So in the summertime, especially, when people are doing their canning and those kinds of things. The organics, the trucks hauling the organics, they get very slushy and they begin to, and because the trucks are older now, their seals aren't as good, and they're in my district they're really full, so we're getting lots of spills, lots of like waste on the streets. So how are you going to deal with that? Because you're not dealing with it now in a very timely way. In some cases you are. I need to be fair, but in some other cases it's like the rain that eventually takes away the stench from the street, right? So we need to do that better. What are you working on to do that better? Because this is becoming a serious problem, right?
And that was, sorry, that was your last question.
We have protocols on cleaning up any type of leakage through our vehicles when they're on the streets and definitely when they're at the transfer stations. We're working very closely with the contractors to ensure that the rehabilitation of their vehicles is on schedule and the seals are fixed when they need to be fixed. We have contract managers that are out driving the routes and making sure that if there is leakage that it's reported and addressed. But I do understand your concern, and we will definitely double down on those efforts to make sure that those issues dissipate as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. I did forget to ask outside councillors if any had questions, but I know they probably would have flagged me if they did. Seeing no additional questions, I have a few questions.
No, I will take a question.
Okay.
Chair. I happen to be waiting for my item, but I figured I would ask it. Through you to the general manager, 311 reporting, that's available to councillors, is it not? Can we go in there and look and see, the types of complaints we get about waste collection? Do you know what some of the top complaints might be?
Through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, the top complaints would be miscollection, to be honest. And when we get those, we will be there the next day, if not that day, to pick them up, whether it's city staff or the contractor. But that's generally the biggest complaint that we get.
Yeah, and would you be surprised if maybe some of the other top ones might not necessarily be just collections, but just things like broken bin lid, changing size, that type of stuff? If you looked at the whole taxonomy of 311 concerns.
Through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, yes, for sure there would be calls on broken bins and litter and those items, overflowing bins sometimes, and of course we dispatch our teams for that. I wouldn't necessarily call a broken bin a complaint. It's more of a service request to have it fixed. But yeah,
of course,
I understand where you're going.
Yeah, and if it was a miscollection, I guess there's two kinds of that. There's miscollection at a house, and there, or a particular pickup point, and there's sort of a miscollection on a street. Can you give a comment on what kind of miscollections you might see in terms of volume? Is one bigger than the other? Is there a particular reason when it happens?
Through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, I'd have to go and look at the volume in order to make an educated comment about that. But generally, a miscollection is a driver didn't see the materials, it was behind a car. Unfortunately, that happens. And sometimes the operator's on a new route and hasn't experienced that street, or might have skipped the street by accident. And those are innocent mistakes, and they're generally either fixed that day or the next day. And just in terms of overall reliability of the service, we collect almost 70 million collection points a year, and our overall service reliability in terms of missed collection is 99.98%. So when we look at the service reliability of solid waste and our collection staff, both in-house and contracted, we're doing a great job.
Yeah, just
Morning,
Councillor
Eva.
Layton
Can
was
you hear me?
asking an interesting question
okay.
about
Sorry.
mixing.
I was adjusting. I was listening to council meeting. Just quick question.
Maybe
That
can we
carryover
get that
is for 2020 vacation.
Just hold one moment. We're going to mute
Right.
somebody that's unmuted here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I proceed?
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Layton asked about mixed bins and so on. I know I watch the truck in front of my place often. Sometimes I sit upstairs. There's separate trucks for a lot of parts of the city. I mean, the truck rolls up, the arm grabs the bin, dumps it in, and away it goes. I mean, you'd literally have to be picking up the wrong bin on the wrong day to confuse this stuff. Is that fair?
Through you, Madam Chair, the councillor, that's fair, but mistakes do happen.
I understand that, and I understand there's different types of trucks, but you know, for the suburbs out to Etobicoke, I mean, I don't think we have too many of those mixed trucks. They tend to be separate. Am I correct in that? An
You
organics
are
truck
correct.
is an organics truck, and a garbage truck is a garbage truck, and then recycling is like another day of the week. So the contamination isn't necessarily a universal issue, but I suppose things can happen, right? Mistakes can be made. The wrong bin could be lifted. But is that a common occurrence, or is that fairly rare?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, I'd say that that's very rare.
And the green bins look physically different than the garbage bins. And I get, you know, if it's dark, the recycling and the garbage bin can look a little similar, but the green bins are physically looking different. Is that right?
That's correct, councillor.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was all my questions, Madam Chair. I think I'm out of time.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, I have a few questions. The item before us went out for an RFP, correct? Could you speak to what the main criteria were for consideration through that RFP process?
Yes, Madam Chair, this did go out for a request for quotation to the market, and there were 4 bidders, and GFL was the lowest qualified bidder. The requirements were, you know, a very high level, that they had to have a minimum of 35 trucks, that the contract was 5 years plus an option of 2. There were Vision Zero requirements in this contract, where they needed to provide cameras on their vehicle to ensure, you know, additional safety of our street users and roadway users. There were also requirements to submit an extended producer responsibility transition cost, and in this contract, it ended up being a $0 break fee for our recycling side if council decides to not move forward with having to continuing to collect recyclables during extended producer responsibility. The other piece as well that GFL provided was having all vehicles as compressed natural gas, again looking at the environmental side of the equation versus diesel. And there's a number of others, but I won't bore you with all the details.
Okay, so the selection of this contractor, would it be fair to say then it includes technological considerations, environmental considerations, economic considerations, social work benefits? It's the full gamut of things that were considered through this RFQ rather than RFP process?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor.
Okay, and then based on this RFQ process and the evaluation, this is the recommendation from you today is to proceed with this contractor?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's the recommendation from myself and the Chief Procurement Officer, Mike Patchlock.
Okay, and the Chief Procurement Officer. Okay, thank you. I have no additional questions. We'll move to speakers. Speakers on this item. Councillor Cole. Sorry, outside speakers first. Councillor Holyday, thank you. Sorry, we're not used to guests here. We have 2 guests today. This is great. Thank you, Councillor Holyday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It just happens I was here waiting for the next item, but you know, I'd offer some comments because I live in an area and represent an area that is served by an outside contractor, and I have for a very, very long time. Many may be aware that, you know, Etobicoke was one of the first areas to contract the collections process. And I tell you, just an experience as a citizen, it works fine. You know, the garbage truck comes, it picks up the materials, and away it goes. But the comment I want to make is really more around my role as a councillor, and I've been well into my 2nd term now. one of the things I do is I spend time analyzing the difference between what comes in through the 311 system with respect to what people complain about. And everyone knows, there's millions of complaints made every year, and we have a very sophisticated back-end system, and you can go in through a portal and you can unpack the taxonomy of all the things that people call about. There's a big section on solid waste. I think you find that most of those are transactional in nature, and it came up in my questions, right? There's a bin change or something broke, that sort of thing. But there are two types of miscollections. There's one where they miss a house or a point pickup, and then there's also where they might have missed a street. The interesting thing, though, is you compare that to the types of calls that come into the counselor's office. And those are escalations that haven't been dealt with through the 311 system. What I can say is very clearly that it is very rare to get a call about a solid waste pickup issue. I'm not saying we never do, but in terms of compare that to a snow event or compare that to our parks or transportation issues that tend to be a little bit more complex in nature, they are very rare. So it tells me the system is working very, very well. And I know everyone is in different parts of the city, has different experiences with the way that the collection works. But I can just speak to the configuration of a suburban area that has had contracted services for a long time. I don't see a problem with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is my recommendation to the committee. Whether it was this contractor or that contractor, and it's changed many times over the years, they all seem to do the same thing. They show up on collection day, they pick up the particular garbage that it is, or recycling or organics. And as we know now, it's all done with a lift arm where the arm comes and it tips the bin into the truck. And I would just make that comment that if your experience in front of your own property is a little different with mixed waste trucks and so on, right here it's fairly straightforward. There's an individual truck for each of the operations, including individual trucks for things like heavy pickup and specialized services. So just comment from my colleagues on the committee. As a councillor that has this services, I really have nothing to be concerned about, and I hope to see continued services in this part of the city, uninterrupted services. And I hope we don't have any issues here with the contract. I'd like to make sure that garbage collection continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Additional outside councillors to speak? Okay, seeing none, inside councillors. Councillor Cole?
Yes, I have a motion that I just want to add on to this item. It's asking for more information, if we could have it displayed.
Yep, they're pulling it up. Just one second.
Yeah, requesting the General Manager of Solid Waste and Chief Procurement to report by January 2022 things like costs, annual increases in costs, number of complaints. I think we should have this by district. Certainly, 311 is a very good barometer of good city services. So I'd like to see that compiled for us to share with our constituents. If there are any penalties for providers when they fail to meet up to contract specifications, any warnings that there might be to service, and the diversion rates, just to see how we're doing between different districts. I think that's interesting to see. Contingency fees. So these are a number of things I'd like to have at our disposal for council. Certainly this information, if we can't get it for this council, again, in the future, for January, we can get it. I think it's good information to have. Again, this is a very serious commitment the city is making for up to 8 years with this contract, and it's quite a substantive contract. So we've got to be continually measuring the performance and comparing the performance with our city workers as opposed to the private sector workers. And also to look at ways of improving the service all the time, and to saving cost, because this is serious money, up to $80 million. So it needs some serious scrutiny by council. I'm just trying to get more information forward. I think overall, all the garbage you want to call them that, but waste collection workers across the city, whether they be private sector or city workers, do an outstanding job, considering they have to be there every day, no matter if it's snow, rain, sleet. They're there picking up, waste and recycling. And as you know, it's quite challenging. I mean, Etobicoke, wonderful Etobicoke with its beautiful lawns and wide streets, but you can imagine going up with their garbage trucks up Manning Avenue in Toronto or Clinton or Mansfield. God help you if you're trying to drive a truck and turn the corner of Clinton and Mansfield, for instance. So it's also a very challenging job because there's a lot of stress when the garbage trucks go up and down the streets because everybody is trying to get up and down the streets. They have to wait. They get very impatient. People start beeping their horns. But it is a very challenging job in terms of physical safety for the operators. So they are under pressure constantly. And so it's not just, a job we sometimes take too far for granted. And we've got to appreciate these incredible people that, work extremely hard, again, dealing with some, as Councillor Prutz has said, never mind the smell on the road. When you're sticking your head into garbage trucks all day and garbage bins, these workers deserve some credit when they do this essential city service. As we all know as councillors, this is one of the critical services amongst others that the city offers to keep our city not only clean, but I think from a public health perspective, very safe and healthy. So again, we should continue to look at this extension of this contract and to see what the value for money is, and is there any way we can continue to get good service. And then the other thing is we should also encourage these contractors, whether city contractors or private contractors, to look at moving to electric trucks so that we get rid of the noise. Electric trucks are now becoming mainstream, produced by Ford, Tesla, others. So we should ask them their long-range plans and procurement to get away from the dirty diesel and move to electric vehicles possibly in the future, so they won't be spewing the carbon emissions there on our streets, because they are obviously on our streets in great numbers every day. So that's another thing I hope in the future that we can have them look at the replacement of the diesels with electric trucks, if feasible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions of the mover?
I just have a very quick question before I jump into the question. I just wanted to say, because Matt's still here, and to my good friend Carlisle at Solid Waste, it would be remiss if I didn't point out that some of our vehicles are being transitioned to clean renewable natural gas that we're collecting from our own waste going out, and it's a very exciting project that we're doing. It's still burning carbon, but it's burning carbon that we captured that would have been burnt off in the flaring process at the city's plant. So just as an aside. My question is, just very quickly, Councillor Cole, would you be against just adding contamination rates to that list?
No, I'm very fine with it. I think that's very, very important to add on. Sorry for my omitting that.
Okay.
But definitely, we should ask for that too.
That's okay. Thanks so much. Maybe the clerk can make that as a friendly amendment. Just add to the list contamination rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The clerk has taken that as friendly and will prepare it as such. Additional speakers on this item? Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'll try to be very brief. I brought up some questions I had with performance in the contract because it's clear from the answers we got from city staff that there's seemingly no cost benefit anymore to privatizing waste collection, because that seems to have eliminated itself in the course of time, which we all suspected that would happen. I think the difference here, and Councillor Cole brought it up, this is an important job, and the compensation to the workers was always a major factor. Yes, it's the fair wage policy that applies, but that doesn't necessarily qualify them for the same level of benefits and support that you get when you're a City of Toronto employee. And given just how challenging a job this is on both the physical body and the mental toll it takes. I think on the back of one of those trucks during the winter months for the long shifts, I think it's only fair that we compensate those workers appropriately. But what I wanted to get to is our value for money piece around survey. And I'm happy to hear that Councillor Holiday has had a positive experience with the collection in his ward. It's all mixed trucks. Those streets that Councillor Cole was mentioning are all in my ward. It's because that's where he grew up, and that's fine, and we welcome him back frequently. But it's all mixed trucks. And here's the thing, this is why it's getting contaminated. It's they fill one side, or when one side gets full, they don't drive back to empty out. They just start putting everything in the empty side. Maybe it's that my house is late in the day. It is towards the late afternoon when they get to my street. But there's no claw reaching for one in front of my house. Someone goes, pulls them both out between the parked cars, puts one in, flips it, and typically, because I got a small garbage bin, picks up my garbage bin, gives it a tip in, but throws them in the same side. I don't know what side they're throwing it in, to be quite honest, because everything's getting mixed and you just see it mixing. So I suspect it's because one side of the truck is full and they're being told or instructed not to drive back to the yard to dump a load because it's full on one side, that they're just packing it in the other side. This is why I think it's important for us to look at, and it's not something I witnessed one or two times, it's literally every second week. And so it's important for us to figure out what's going on with diversion rates as well, because and if I could ask the clerk just to put the slide up that I sent, we have the information about diversion rates. This is from a 2017 presentation report from staff that clearly shows lower diversion rates in areas 1 and 2 compared to 3 and 4. It doesn't look big on this graph, but it is a significant percentage, and every percentage point is one that we have fought to achieve. So this information is available. I also want to see the contamination data, because boy, oh boy, is it frustrating to me as someone who takes great care in cleaning and separating my recyclables and ensuring that everything that goes in the green bin can go in the green bin, down to tissues in my bathroom, washrooms, I make sure are going in the right bin. It's very frustrating, and I'm sure it's not just me that when people see it, it's like, oh, well, if they're just going to throw it all in the same place anyhow, what's the point? Honestly, what's the point? And so I would like to know, and maybe it's true of all the routes. Maybe there's something said for the way those mixed trucks operate. Like if it seems quite straightforward, and as Councillor Holiday described it, if it's one truck, one thing, you can't really make the mistake. But in the situation with a mixed truck, if you have a full garbage hopper and an empty compost side, or vice versa with recycling, why would, you're going to drive all the way back to the yard, drop it, and then come back? That's not the way it practically happens. We have one truck go by and that's it, unless there's a truck for large things and whatever. So I'd like to know whether or not this is an issue and a challenge that we have. As far as the fleet, I was really surprised to see a vehicle that had completely opposite messaging than we normally have in our city, which is why I sent it to Matt, and I thank him for following up so quickly. They are supposed to have a fleet that's kept in good order, that we don't have to rely on going to other municipalities to find trucks. They are supposed to have that fleet. I have some concerns that we would so easily accept the excuse that, well, we ran out of trucks, so we just drove one in from Vaughan. I'm challenged by that. Because then what happens when they run out of trucks in Vaughan? Are they taking our trucks, and is our service suffering as a result? So I think it's important to focus on some of the performance things now that we know that money is not an incentive for municipalities to continue down privatizing essential services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Additional speakers to this item, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Madam. Thank Councillor Layton for sitting and watching the garbage being collected on his garbage day, so he could come to committee and inform us, what's going in and what's going out. I think that's great. I also wanted to actually comment on sort of what I see as a one-dimensional analysis of the costs are all the same. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, and maybe Madam Chair will explain it to the committee. before we went out on our contracting out initiative, the public sector was more expensive, and their performance wasn't as great as the private sector was. And so when we went out and we moved to 50% the private sector, the public sector saw the writing on the wall, and they were forced to up the game because they knew if they didn't, that they might lose the rest of the city. So it is that competition that has forced the public sector to get better at what they do in terms of efficiency and in terms of waste diversion. So this idea that everything's all the same now leads to the potential conclusion that, oh, let's all go back to the old system. Well, no, that's exactly wrong. We should be continuing to rely on the private sector to keep the public sector competitive and to keep the public sector efficient. And that's why I'm supporting the report before us, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Additional speakers on this item? Okay, just briefly, I just want to thank city staff for undergoing a rigorous RFQ process. Thank the General Manager of Solid Waste and the Chief Procurement Officer for the recommendation before us today. It is good to hear that the vehicles will use compressed natural gas and be moving away from diesel. And, Councillor Cole's right, the next step is electric, but I think we still have a long way to go on that front, unfortunately. Importantly, that there is a zero break that's negotiated through this so that when EPR becomes available to us, we're able to make that decision without a cost penalty. So on that basis, I'm happy to move staff recommendations. We'll move to a vote first on Councillor Cole's item, the amendment from Councillor Layton to that first. So here it is, just adding waste contamination rate. So we'll vote on that amendment. Okay, all those in favor of Councillor Layton's amendment? All those opposed? That carries. All those in favor of Councillor Cole's motion? All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. All those in favor of the item as amended? All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. Thank you. That brings us to our next item, which is IE 25.10 Centennial Park Master Plan. In Ward 2, we do have a deputant. We'll hear from them first, followed by questions of staff. Michael Longfield, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for joining us, Michael. You have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Thank you and hello, members of IEC. My name is Michael Longfield, and I'm the president of Midweek Cycling Club, a longtime permit holder at Centennial Park. I'm speaking today on behalf of bike racers and also the coaches, volunteers, and fans from across Toronto and the entire Golden Horseshoe area. We wrote in, and I'm deputing today to ask that the Centennial Park Master Plan explicitly make space for the sport of cycling at the park. We also want to see Toronto re-embrace its support of bike racing in general. Just 2 weekends ago, Midweek helped host the first sanctioned bike race in Toronto since the start of the pandemic in Centennial Park. Working under the COVID protocols from Toronto Public Health, the race was still a welcome return for the community, challenging over 250 competitors on a 3-kilometer circuit up, down, and around the hill in a cyclocross race. Centennial Park has been an important venue for the discipline of cyclocross since the late 1990s. Cyclocross is a crowd-friendly hybrid of mountain biking and road biking that rewards bike handling over raw speed. National and international races have been held here. In particular, the Centennial Park Hill, belovedly known in the racing community as Mount Garbage, as much for the feelings of nausea riding up it induces as for its origins, is a key feature in these events. Because it's raced on grass and dirt in parks, cyclocross is often considered safer and attracts people, including many women and youth, who find the speed and pavement of road racing more intimidating. And I'll say you haven't seen determination until you've seen the face of a 15-year-old girl racing her bike at Mount Garbage. Looking through the designs and decks, we see the appeal of transforming the ski hill into a savanna with trees and paths. In reality, as an organizer, however, we fear concerns about conflicts with other park users and being told that Centennial is yet again another park that is now implicitly off limits. While we support the reimagining and more Indigenous placemaking in the master plan, Our urgency today is the realization that without explicitly acknowledging the history of bike racing in its master plan, that if we lose Centennial Park as a bike racing venue, we lose the last dependable vestige of bike racing in Toronto. There remain too few parks or roads that welcome bike races in Toronto. Toronto used to hold short circuit races called criteriums at Queen's Park, St. Lawrence Market, Ossington Street, and Hyde Park that saw fans watch high-speed races in a lively street festival atmosphere that also could boost local businesses. 20 years ago, Toronto parks used to see 5 or 6 cyclocross races a year in its parks. A pre-pandemic return of Christie Pitts helped bring the sport downtown. Today, however, cycling is less of a niche activity than it used to be, but the challenge of organizing a bike race in Toronto has only grown. One of the few positives to come out of the pandemic has seen more people discovering or rediscovering the joys of riding a bike, both as an inexpensive, efficient means of transportation around your neighborhood and for fun and exercise for physical and mental health. As Council debates the future of cycling for transportation in Toronto, we believe more can be done, including clearer direction from Council and staff to work with responsible organizers and permit holders like Midweek to create more new cycling events in our city, both for its residents and to attract people from around the world. Help us ensure that changes don't mean we lose Centennial Park as a bike racing venue, and help us find more ways to bring more bike racing back to Toronto. And to the councillors here on committee, when organizers come knocking at your door, help us find solutions in your ward. We know not every park is suitable, but not every park should be off limits. We look forward to working with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your deputation. Questions to the deputant? Councillor Holyday?
I did. Thank you for speaking to us, Michael. Indeed, I remember signing off on the amplified sound permit for your event. I'm glad it took place. Can you tell me a little bit more about exactly what you need with respect to the hill? And I did take a note. You had some concerns over the planting, but is there any other details you'd like to bring to the attention of the committee? Because there's lots of space and trails in the park, which I think you'll find this plan is complementary to what you're trying to do. But if there's a technical issue, could you tell us what it is?
Thanks for the chance to answer, Councillor. And again, thanks for the support at Centennial over the years. I really appreciate it, and it's just a great venue for it. I think looking at the master plan, I mean, right now with the ski hill, the fact it's so open and generally, other than skiing, it doesn't have a lot of uses year round. That kind of openness can give organizers like us a lot of flexibility to create a course that provides a lot of challenges, creates a really fun event that sort of also then minimizes potential conflicts with other park users. We're generally not in the way of people that are trying to walk or hike or take their dogs or do other things. And there aren't the sort of concerns about, which from my perspective tend to be maybe amplified, about damaging the park because the hill is already, something that's primarily used for skiing. Again, not sure that what's being proposed in the master plan will mean the park is off limits, but just with the additional paths that seem like they're proposed up that side of Centennial, the savanna features, the more trees, it just seems there would be more reasons for somebody at some point to say, no, you can't hold your race here. And given we're organizers midweek are told that consistently about many parks across the city, we're just concerned that it then means Centennial will be, the last park we're told, no, you can't race here anymore.
Okay, with that, I'm going to pose a question because I have to. Would you be comfortable in reaching out to me just to talk to a little bit more of the details? And would you also recognize there may be a little difference between an organized event and maybe more organic cyclocross, which is a little different, right? If you've got, a couple of people they're taking an off-road course without supervision, without all those kinds of things that you would provide with a supported event, there might be two different things there that we might need to get into the details. So is that something you could do between now and council just to make sure we've covered off any concerns?
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Thanks for the opportunity.
Very good. No further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holyday. Any additional questions for the speaker? Councillor Layton?
I would just add, if you can bring that cyclocross event back to Christie Pitts, while our grounds teams may not appreciate it, it was, boy oh boy, was it fun. And I didn't get on a bike for it because I'm a little afraid to go down the Christie Pitts hill on a bike. But it was a whole lot of fun to watch. And if you haven't been to a cyclocross race, folks, you should go and check it out. They really get the energy pumping.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an event we'd love to have back, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions of Deputant? Okay, seeing none, we move to questions of staff. Deputy Mayor Holiday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to assume the GM is on the line or some of the staff responsible for the plan. I think I see Anne-Marie there as well. I guess my main question at the beginning of the report, well, let's back it up. Centennial Park is really large. However, one really big piece of the park is the 27-hole golf course. At the beginning of the report, it mentions that the golf course is out of scope, but as you go through the depths of it, you will find that there is a lot spoken about the golf course and there's some ideas for it. And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what the plan says about the future for the golf course.
I can ask Anne-Marie to answer. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. So we basically, as part of the master plan, we took the golf course out because it is basically assumed that it will continue in its current form. And it's, as you well know, it's a very successful course. So that's basically what we were doing. And given the expanse and the location of the golf course, it was really not a challenge to do so in the master plan.
Would it be fair to say that the master plan actually proposes some enhancements to the golf course? And I take note that there's a lot of naturalized areas in the park already, but some of the discussion in the plan says we're going to continue to naturalize. And that idea really meshes with the concept of a golf course, like increased plantings, increase diversity, especially around the edges and through parts of the center. Is it a fair assertion that the master plan does talk about the golf course? It says that it will continue to evolve and mature.
Yeah, naturalization, we wouldn't necessarily do a screeching halt at the golf course boundary. And we've always been able to work with golf courses, particularly on that piece. And we would want to see that kind of continuity around that.
So, maybe a granular example would be increased planting. There's already lots of nice trees on the golf course, but why not have more? Why not have more different types of plantings around it that increase the rough or hazards or those type of things that really mesh with our naturalization plans? Does that kind of sound like what it talks about?
Yeah, we would look at naturalized enhancements that obviously would correspond to what the golf course could support, but that's something that we try and do when we have that interface, which we do throughout the city between golf courses and our ravine lands.
Okay, and so maybe to summarize, if a resident asked me, said, "Hey, this report it shows the golf course on the map and everything, but at the beginning of the report it says it's out of scope. What's the future? Is it going to change?" Maybe would I be fair to say that the answer is that staff didn't put a lot of study into the golf course because it's a golf course, but it has included the golf course in the master plan because of some of the naturalization concepts and some of the ideas that the golf course needs to work together with everything. So it's not out of the plan, it's not gone, it's just that it wasn't studied in depth.
Well, it's because basically the use remains. So the idea of the naturalization would be a supportive use with the golf course. So from that perspective, yes. But in terms of looking at a master plan, did we look at the golf course? No, the master plan assumed that the golf course would remain. And but on the naturalization piece, in terms of that type of integration, that's something that we would look at park-wide, and of course bring the golf course into that discussion.
Very good. Thank you. I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any additional questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, speakers on this item. Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, I really just want to let the committee know and let the staff listening know how important this is to Etobicoke Centre. I specifically want to thank Casey Morris and David O'Hara and the large team that they work with to make this happen. To my colleagues, a bit of the background: Centennial Park is so much more than just a park within the ward. We heard from the previous speaker who talked about everyone in the Golden Horseshoe. comes for an event in that park. And that's one of the interesting things about this location. It's one of the largest parks in the city. It has so many layers to the onion about how people use it. And it's used on an Ontario-wide basis, specifically because of some of the unique facilities. And it's used on a city level. It's used on a, half the city level, and it's even right at the neighborhood level, right? People go and just have a picnic or just go for a walk. And I invite anybody to come out and have a look at it. But with all of those users, the challenge is there's always push and pull about what to do next, or how to change the park, or add this or take away that. And so this master plan sets a vision. And I can tell you firsthand, because I went to a number of them, the enormous amount of consultation that was done with a variety of users, everything from organized sports right to pop-up events of people in the neighborhood. And the unique thread is literally everyone that you encounter has a story to say about this park because it's affected their lives. So I think this plan is really exciting. It speaks to history. It speaks to Indigenous history, things we haven't seen in master planning documents. And it really sets a very exciting path forward for the next several decades. And it even talks about some really short-term changes that I think people will really appreciate. So I cannot stress enough how important this is to the community, just because it's a large landform and it's a large, significant piece of the park system. But in terms of culture and heritage, for people that live in Etobicoke, this is it. This is part of our identity. And I just really want to express how important this is and what a fine job everyone involved in this process has done to bring this plan to where it is today. I hope you will support this. I hope you will join me in supporting it at council, and really just a big thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any additional speakers on this item? Okay, I just want to say congratulations to the Deputy Mayor for your hard work on this, and it looks like it's going to be a great park, and I'm sure we all look forward to visiting it at some point. Councillor Layton's given it 2 thumbs up. Okay, all those in favor of the item? All those opposed? That item carries. Thank you. That brings us to our next item, which is 25.11, improving winter access to Toronto's parks for 2021 to 2022. We have one speaker, Adam Roy Cahoon. Adam, do we have you on the line?
Yeah.
Hi, Adam. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, just to be clear, this is about winter snow clearing and
That's correct.
Public parks. All right. What I want to say, as a wheelchair user, I really, as much as I know right now it's still a program out of unused park and rec money, but I really want the city to actually look at making such a thing long term. If we are really going to be a city of 4 seasons, where we actually encourage people to get out and actually still get fresh air, I think after the pandemic, we probably learned that the advice is not going to be that when you need to get out and get exercise, go to the mall as much as that used to be the theory. And so, and also, as a person in a wheelchair, there are some parts where even when there is a bit of snow, people are still using some of the parks as a shortcut, and you can see that by the desire lines of the snow. And now it is trampled down on some of these routes. But as a person in a wheelchair, I am not able to access them. And I also want to ask, for this year, as the year of public art, I do want to actually know if maybe some of the money could be used to actually provision cleaning the snow around some of the public art sculptures to actually give people more access to the public art sculptures that are on city parks land and other city public spaces to actually have people enjoy them all year this winter, because this winter is still gonna be a winter where parks are probably gonna be utilized a lot more. One of the things, when you're actually giving access to the parks and clearing them, it actually makes it easier for us to actually enjoy them in the spring. Because you know how we usually get one of those warm days in late February or early March where everybody takes that extra enjoyment, where I can't actually enjoy my neighborhood park because maybe the snow has been left to thaw on the path, and it's still gonna be an extra 2 weeks for it to thaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, questions of staff. Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. So just so I can confirm, we are building on the washrooms and the snow clearing that we did last year. So we're not eliminating any of that, we're actually adding to it. On the washroom front,
That's correct.
Can you tell me the total numbers of washrooms we had last year, pre 2020 season, what we had in 2020 and what we will have in 2021, just in sort of that chronological order?
Sure. So through the speaker, I know Donna is on as well. So prior to this sort of winter maintenance expansion, we had a total of 64 public washrooms available through the winter months, and that was a combination of our own washrooms in parks and things like washroom accessibility in artificial ice rinks and a couple of other facilities. Through this service expansion, we will have approximately 148 park washrooms available throughout the winter.
And as for our pathway clearing, what does it mean to bring us more in line with the city's, with the transportation division standards?
I'm going to ask Donna to answer that question. She's been working directly with Transportation Services, who have been a very willing and great partner in this expansion as well.
Thanks, Janie. Council, we've been working with transportation to align our services to be able to best utilize the resources that we both have in order to expand to additional areas of snow clearing. So that'll include perimeter sidewalks, and it'll also include paved interior pathways that can sustain the equipment and also allow access through a park system from streets to community links, such as a TTC stop or a community center.
So I think this is resolving the issue that really put this in or brought it home for me. Was I once had to carry a stroller with a child in it over 3 feet of snow between a TTC stop and the side of Christie Pitts Park, where there was the TTC stop was cleared into the sidewalk on the side of the park because the sidewalk on the side of the park hadn't been done. This is going to resolve that issue where now it'll be that one beautiful little mini sidewalk plow that is probably plowing half the neighborhood as well, because we're close to one of the piloted areas, and now that's being fully expanded across downtown core. It's just going to clear that sidewalk and keep on going, right?
That is our goal. I see Vince is also on the line. I'm not sure if he wants to comment on that as well.
Vince is going to be driving the plow. So. Yeah, but that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about bringing it in line. It's not now, we're not going to send a parks worker out. We're not going to send a a staff person for that transit stop. We're not going to have the sidewalk plow doing just the residential routes. We're trying to figure out how to make it more efficient overall. Correct?
So through the speaker, if I can just quickly comment, and then if Vince wants to, if Vince wants to add, I think as Donna said, that's our goal. But I think it is a big city, and there are certain pathways and certain parks that are sort of priority clearing areas versus, many of the smaller parks as an example. So I wouldn't want to give people the example that the impression that every single park pathway and sidewalk is going to be cleared through this program. I think the report sort of outlines where our priorities are for that type of clearing, and wherever possible, I think to Donna's point, we have worked really, really well with transportation to both access their equipment and their own clearing, with the goal, to the speaker, to Councillor Layton, of addressing the types of things that you're bringing up today.
Right. That's great, Janie. Thank you. Could I just add the number of washrooms that were added this year? What was the criteria that we used to either winterize a washroom or provide a porta potty?
So through the speaker, I think our criteria has been, first of all, the washrooms that we have that are winterized are obviously our priority to keep open and have access to them. We have tried to prioritize the highest use sites where we know that there's extensive use of parks throughout the winter. It is the sort of high use parks, whether they're regional parks, whether they're waterfront parks, but the ones that we know are often the subject of a destination walk, so to speak, in the winter, or local parks that have extensive pathways and trails that are easy to connect and easy to clear, that also have high use.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional questions of staff? Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I just would like to know, are there going to be more washrooms in local parks as opposed to regional parks?
It's really, it's not so much regional versus local. It's really based on usage and where the trails are and what they connect to and that piece of it.
I'm talking about the toilets, not the trails.
Oh, you're talking about portable washrooms where there are no existing washrooms? Again, it would be based on highest use. So a local park, as an example, with a local playground that is quite small in nature, likely would not receive a portable washroom, where a larger park that is connected to various trails and walking systems where we know there's high usage would be the locations we would be targeting, very similar to last winter, apologies.
Okay, well, and will these, do you have a fear that some of these winterized toilets and new toilets will encourage more encampments?
Good Speaker, that's not the intention of this program, for sure. This is a program that is very much intended around high-use parks that are receiving general usage in the winter, versus encampments where there's, a different strategy generally around providing, washrooms and other amenities for people who are experiencing homelessness.
So if you believe that, the installation of one of these, or winterization or the installation of one of these toilets would encourage an encampment, would you decide not to put a toilet in that location?
To the Speaker, I think, the issues around homelessness and locations and those living outside, larger issue around that is coordinated with shelter support and housing and others. It wouldn't really just be a PF&R decision around providing amenities in case there is an encampment somewhere.
But would you agree with the statement that the park should be used for recreational use and it shouldn't be used to encourage encampments?
I don't think the intention of this program is specifically to, through the Speaker, to encourage encampments. I think it is focused on residents who are using parks in the winter. I can say that as a goal of the program in general.
Would it be fair to say, though, that an unintended consequence of it could be, you put up a winterized toilet, then that they could have that unintended consequence?
To the speaker, I can't really say one way or the other, to be honest. I mean, our public washrooms are available for everybody to use, and there are many people who use our public washrooms throughout the city in the course of their day. So it's hard to say whether it's an encampment use or a particularly residential use. It's certainly not something we monitor around the use of public washrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Additional questions of staff? Okay, I just have one question. Last year I've asked as well, the waterfront trail, many of the trails in the ravines, people are anxious to find ways to get out to them. You're not recommending this year, but can you say what you're doing instead?
Madam Chair, if you can, instead of...
So your pilot specifically.
Understanding the question. Oh, the pilot specifically. I'm going to ask Donna and Kim to explain the pilot.
Sure, thanks, Councillor through the chair. The pilot essentially looks at sites within the city that have attributes similar to environmentally significant areas, things that are close to water courses, ravines, that have bridge components. And we are looking at, we formed a working group. We're working closely with TRCA, Urban Forestry, Fleet Transportation, and we're looking at different products that we could utilize that are not harmful to the environment. So the pilot project has chosen 2 sections within the city that have those types of attributes that we would like to test. And we're going to use a product that doesn't have those environmentally sensitive, those environmentally harmful products in it to test it to see how it sustains through the winter and evaluate that in the spring.
Okay, so that data collected this year could inform better decision-making around use of trail clearing and ESAs in the future.
That is correct.
Okay, great. I have no additional questions. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none. Speakers on this item? Okay, Councillor Layton.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just move the staff recommendations, I suppose, and thank staff for what I think is a really thoughtful report and for taking seriously Council's request to expand washroom access in the winter season. It might seem silly, these discussions about washrooms and people having a go, and but when you're with your kids, when you're with your friends, when you're playing a sport, when you're going tobogganing, when you're out skating, when you're just going for a walk, walking your child, or walking your dog, when you gotta go, you gotta go. And having to go, go walk the several blocks or jump in your car and drive back to your house in order to relieve yourself is not something that you'd expect in a winter city, a city that prides itself on being a winter city. So expanding access to washrooms is good for all Torontonians. It's also about equity. I probably feel a little bit more comfortable going to the washroom outside than maybe others would, including my own partner, who might be a little bit more shy about that sort of thing. There is a equity argument here that I think needs to be taken very seriously. Not all people in our city are created equally and can hold it in long enough in order to get home. And we also have the very serious equity issue about access to public toilets in general for those who don't have the luxury of jumping in their car or walking home. The fact is there are many individuals that don't feel comfortable and safe coming indoors, as this is a pandemic. We're still in a pandemic. There are some that don't feel comfortable and safe going indoors, and we need to make sure for our public safety and for the individual's health that they have access to the very basic of human needs. Not all the washrooms are available to them now that were once available through 24-hour coffee shops and restaurants and all the other places that formerly homeless individuals would have an option to go to. We need to stand somewhere on this argument, and I don't buy the fact that we should keep washrooms closed because otherwise they're going to encourage encampments. I just don't think that's true. We had to go and bring facilities to areas that were where homeless individuals were encamped last summer. It didn't have to do with the availability of washrooms. And it furthermore, what would it matter? Because we would still want those individuals to have access to appropriate facilities. It's a matter of dignity. It's a matter of public health for all of us, but most specifically those individuals. And so I think I'm very pleased to see this report come forward. The accessibility portion of the clearing of the snow from pathways is equally as important for a variety of different reasons. But I'm very happy to see us taking steps in the right direction here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. And on behalf of pregnant women and women who have given birth, thank you for those comments on the need for bathrooms in our parks. Okay, any additional speakers on this item? Okay, Councillor Layton has moved staff recommendations. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. That brings us to IE 25.15, non-motorized watercraft opportunities in the Outer Harbour. The speaker is Sarah Samwaru. Sarah, are you on the line?
Hello, yes, I am.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for having me. So today I'm speaking not only as a resident of Toronto who loves water sports and water activities, but also as a small business owner that provides kayak and canoe rentals to my community. Within the last few years, especially during the pandemic, I think we all can admit and understand that we've seen an immense rise, more than ever, in Torontonians venturing out into nature and engaging in water activities. These ranging from boats, yachts, jet skis, and of course, what we're talking about today, non-motorized vessels like kayaks, canoes, and paddleboards. I think it's safe to say that this is unlikely to change or to decrease. It's clear that Toronto residents from all different demographics within the last few years are turning to the waterfront to spark joy, to escape, to rest, or just to recharge. That being said, we must acknowledge the majority of residents living in the inner city do not own a personal vehicle. Therefore, they are, using public transit. Therefore, if they did own a personal non-motorized vessel, the transportation for their personal kayaks, canoes, or paddleboards during the on-season may not be ideal or even cost-friendly, right? Furthermore, when considering the mass demographic of Torontonians in the city that are condo dwellers, storage options for their vessels are also quite limited. From the last meeting, it was pretty much determined that new infrastructure and supports for non-motorized watercraft in the Outer Harbour should be limited to locations currently leased to third-party operators, including existing boat clubs and rental locations, and any new opportunities should not disrupt naturalized areas, shorelines, or tree canopies. That's, of course, understood. But when we're looking at these marinas or boat clubs that are in existence that they're referring to, on average, storage costs can cost upwards of $2,000 per year for a kayak or canoe. So, when you look at those costs, and of course, being a resident in the inner city, it's quite limiting. So, while this is an available option for residents, it's not a very affordable one. So essentially, today I'm speaking to stress that the residents of Toronto want to have access to affordable and efficient storage to hold their vessels, but we also want to have access to more boat launches that aren't overcrowded. And if we are unable to transport our equipment efficiently, or we're unable to have affordable storage or storage means along the waterfront, then, the next best option for us to be able to participate in water activities along the waterfront, really engage, is to then rent equipment. And that goes to my next point with regarding rental companies. Currently, there's only around 5 to 6 legally operating rental companies based off of the municipality's restrictive RFP, or request for proposal, or permit process that was established. That means residents actually don't have a lot of choice or options when it comes to the equipment that they're able to rent. With regards to Ward 14 in Outer Harbor, the nearest rental location which was established, is Cherry Beach. So when you're looking at that ward specifically in comparison to other wards like Woodbine Beach, where there's 2 companies operating within 1.5 kilometers of each other, why are we only limiting Outer Harbor and the Cherry Beach region to have only 1 rental company present? So that's one of the concerns as not only a resident, but as a small business owner for kayaks and canoe rental services. We really seem to be limiting the options for residents with regards to their choice and the amount of equipment they're able to rent or the equipment that they're able to own, due to the fact that there's just not enough storage options available. And like I said, when you look at the marinas or boat clubs that are already in existence that, was referred to in the previous meeting, they're just not cost effective for a lot of residents in Toronto.
Thank you for your deputation. Additional questions? Any questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none. Questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers on this item? Sorry, Councillor Layton, was that to speak? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I would just move the recommendation and thank staff for the report. It was a couple of years ago that we actually, I sent a letter to committee about building some space for water and for small craft water entry, non-motorized watercraft entry, and I was calling on the city to be a paddle-friendly city, and we did do some projects as a result of that. But there's more that can be done. I think, as was outlined by the previous speaker, I don't have any additional solutions for you today. We did contemplate in that report request years ago a quasi boat sharing system, not unlike Bixby. Although I was hoping that a private operator could to come in and take that on, just because I think it'd probably be a little bit difficult for the city to pull off. But you're constantly, like, there's a lot of areas you can paddle in our city, but you're always having to go back to the same location rather than just to be a one-way trip. And I thought it might be fun to undertake that. But I'm glad that we're sort of slowly moving in that direction to try to make it a little bit more bearable for those that are trying to access the waterfront and to go and enjoy the water or the other water courses in the city of Toronto. I'm glad that we're taking steps along that way, and I look forward to us continuing to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. Other speakers on this item? Okay, just briefly, I want to thank city staff. They are making progress on this. I appreciate that some think it may be too slow, but I know that it is a significant undertaking, and they have made significant progress this year. Councillor Pasternak came out to Scarborough Rouge Park, went for a canoe ride with me last year. So I will just let the committee know that should any of you want to join us next summer, you are more than welcome to do that as well. With that, Councillor Layton has moved staff recommendations. All those in favour? All those opposed? That item carries. That brings us to IE 2517, creating the East Toronto Rail Path. We have 4 speakers on this item. Speakers, just be reminded, you have 5 minutes each. The first speaker is Hafiz Alavi. Hello, we can hear you. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I have not much to say other than I do support this item. I think that the current viaduct above the Evergreen Brickworks is a really good opportunity for the city to beautify the Don Valley, the Don Valley area, and to provide new sort of way for residents to experience an old part of the city, but also to get great views. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Questions of the deputant? Sorry, I just need the screen to switch back there. Questions, Deputant? Seeing none, that brings us to our next speaker, Chris Williams.
To the chair, Chris Williams is connected, and they should be able to connect their audio by clicking on Connect Audio at the bottom of their WebEx panel, and it looks like they've done so now. I am now unmuting the speaker.
Great. Thank you, Chris. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you to the committee for this opportunity to speak to the motion. I'm not in favor of the motion as it stands. However, I believe that it represents a much larger opportunity. This motion lacks a strategy, a business case, and a thorough vetting of the cost-benefit ratio. It is misleading and points to the need for a commitment to the city's direction vis-a-vis the Don River Valley Park, but it does not represent the potential of the asset. In 2016, His Worship Mayor Tory and Jeff Cape, CEO of Evergreen, announced the formation of the Don River Valley Park in the area to the south of the Brickworks. It was meant to be Toronto's signature urban natural park. Montreal's urban natural park is Mount Royal. It's pretty big and it's within a 20-minute walking distance of the urban core. Vancouver has Stanley Park, again, a 20-minute walk from the urban core, and it's even bigger. Both of these parks are iconic parts of the city and massive pieces of tourism infrastructure that literally support billions of dollars worth of business for the city and province. Toronto has yet to commit to investing in building such a comparable piece of infrastructure. We do not lack the money. The Federal Urban Parks Program is actively selecting sites to fund. The Ravine strategy has already attracted federal investment to improve this setting. But what little progress has made on the Don River Valley Park is now under threat. Metrolinx, who owns the CP Don branch, plans to use the Don River Valley as a parking lot for diesel trains, build a service facility for these diesel trains that service Milton, and use the west side of the river for some vaguely defined turnaround operation. This proposed motion represents a tactical approach when a full strategy is required. I recommend the committee revise the motion to include the following. 1, work with the province and the federal governments to define the potential for Toronto's signature urban park in the Don Valley, including the acquisition of the CP Don branch in its entirety from south to north, including the half-mile bridge. Secure the funding from the federal government and the development of the business case, which includes a cost-benefit analysis for tourism, for mental health, both for residents and for visitors to the city. 2, work with the province to compare the value of the above plan in comparison to the costs and benefits of Metrolinx's proposal to use the CP Don branch as a train parking lot. I would remind you that a train parking lot produces no revenue for anybody. 3, request the City of Toronto work closely with the Mississaugas of the Credit and other First Nations who have historical ties to the Don Valley area, including the area at Withrow Broadview, which is Toronto and Canada's first archaeological dig from 6,000 years ago, currently represented by a plaque that is 4 inches by 6 inches. I would like to expand on that point. Toronto has 10 city-funded museums that support tourism, tell ourselves and our visitors the history of this place and what Toronto represents. All 10 are dedicated to the period from 1790 forward, starting with the Fort York and also Todmorden Mills. None of these publicly funded museums have a primary purpose to talk about the 12,000 years that preceded that. Such, the City of Toronto is presenting a distorted version of history. We have misled ourselves and we're misleading visitors as to what's actually happening, and we're not being truthful about the past. As part of this Don Valley Park strategy, we should take the opportunity to fund and build the 11th Toronto Museum, one that brings to life the period starting 12,000 years ago, up to the period of the Toronto Purchase, the beginning of which started in 1787 and was only completed in 2010. The Don Valley would be an excellent spot to do so. It is within walking distance of the urban core, and it is approximately the same size as, let's say, a Stanley Park or a Mount Royal. I would also like to remind Council that Toronto's original road, the Wendat Trail, which connected the site at Withrow over to Babby Point, forms basically Davenport and crosses the Don River at the rail bridge where Metrolinx intends to use. That's a 12,000-year-old artifact. In summary, it would be a mistake to ignore proposals to reindustrialize the Don Valley. It would be a mistake not to put together this plan for the park, and it would be a mistake to let Metrolinx do whatever it feels like. It's time to build a conservation-oriented rail trail accessible to all Canadians, connecting the 6,000-year-old Withrow site to the new Canadians of Thorncliffe Park. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Are there any questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next deputant, Jeff Kettle, with the Federation North Toronto Residents Federation North Toronto Residents Association, Fontra.
Hello?
Hi, Jeff. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm Jeff Cattell, co-chair of the Federation North Toronto Residents Associations, and we're pleased to speak today in support of Councillor Mike Layton's recommendations intended to advance the acquisition and reconstruction of the former CPR line, including the half-mile bridge, as the East Toronto rail path with links to Toronto's existing trail system, including the Martin Goodman Trail, the West Toronto rail path, and the potential for future links to the East Don Trail and the Meadowvale. As Councillor Layton says, at the core of this connection is an abandoned railway line, a railway bridge that has the potential to link the Don Valley's public spaces while providing relief to the existing crowded trails and provide new connections to adjoining neighborhoods. COVID has only increased the demand for expansive public spaces, including places to walk and bike. Toronto is fortunate to have the legacy of an abandoned rail line, and we need to work in multi-sectoral partnership, government, non-government organizations, and residents to re-envisage and recreate this hidden asset as a treasured active transportation gem. I would emphasize that this asset is indeed hidden. There's very little public awareness of this opportunity. My personal story on this one is that I didn't even know about this. Somebody mentioned it in terms of walking opportunities. And so during COVID, I actually now walk this line a couple of times a week from Loblaws, Redway Road, down to the Brickworks. Of course, I don't get onto the half-mile bridge, but this is an amazing, amazing discovery, this trail. It's completely secluded and is basically unknown to the population. But as the previous speaker said, there's an enormous opportunity here. It actually could be a citywide, the next big thing, as it were, in trails and in tourism opportunities too. And the city needs to get behind this in a big way, a big tent, bring people together, talk about the opportunity, expand the opportunity, and then work with the province, and particularly I think the federal government, as the previous speaker said, there is indeed funding there for an amazing opportunity. I think the stars are aligned on this one. We need to open the big tent on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your deputation. Any questions of the deputant? Okay, seeing none, questions of staff? Seeing none, speakers on this item? Seeing none, we'll move the, you might want to speak on this one. Okay, thank you. Councillor Layton, 5 minutes.
Just very quickly, and this came up in the presentation and some of the comments. By no means is this an exhaustive proposal that I'm trying to put forward here. It's one that was brought to light to me by the residents in a community that I've only been representing for a couple of years, but it was brought to me as a long-term project and undertaking that they were interested in acquiring as part of building out a network. There are problems to access for many communities along the Don corridor, along the ravine, and it's something that we should be looking at both neighborhood by neighborhood to ensure access, but also holistically so that everyone has appropriate access. It wasn't meant to be It wasn't meant to be exhaustive. It was simply meant to follow up on a request from 5 residents associations that represent a portion of Ward 11 that is on the ravine. I know there are other areas, and I would entertain other requests from city councilors if they wanted to add on to this motion or add future motions in at council or at this committee to build up its network more. I just didn't want to speak for those communities. I didn't feel it was my place. I would add one other piece, and it was brought up in one of the deputations. It's more important than ever that we start to stake out those natural areas that exist in the ravine that we actually don't yet have control over, because we have competing interests, competing priorities with other provincial agencies, in this case Metrolinx, who would rather move along the lines of industrializing some of the ravine. We know from experience that's a bad idea. We know we should be looking at all other options before even contemplating such moves. And we are being met with some resistance. And so one of the attempts of this is to ensure that another site isn't all of a sudden something being contemplated in that space, but to also bring attention to the importance of not losing the spaces that we currently have, including those that would be taken over by the proposed layover facility in the Don Valley that City Council has objected to and requested a federal environmental assessment for, which was denied. We will continue to fight that proposal with every power that we have as a municipality to ensure that our ravines are kept safe for people that are using them, as well as kept as the natural heritage features and green infrastructure that they are. The request that I've made hopes to improve that how we use this naturalized space and take it away from the possibility of being industrialized in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. We'll vote on the recommendation from Councillor Layton before us. All those in favor? All those opposed? That item carries. That brings us to our next item, which is IE 2520, Scarborough Cycling Report. We have 3 speakers on this. The first one is Hafiz Alabi. Hafiz, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi, thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Hafiz Alavi. I'm a resident of Ward 21, Scarborough Center. I want to first thank Councillor Ainsley for bringing up this well-thought, detailed and realistic report on improving cycling in Scarborough by Andre and his team at UFT. It's honestly refreshing to see at least interest in these findings, so I won't repeat that report's findings. As a high school student who recently moved to Scarborough Center, cycling here is challenging. Best infrastructure near me is the Gano Hydro Corridor Trail. It's not bad if I'm in the mood for recreational cycling or going towards Midtown, but that's about it. There's no safe on-street infrastructure at all. My ward has 0 kilometers of bike lanes, let alone protected ones. Cycling on the sidewalk has been so normalized, it's given people in power to not care about making cycling better. I wasn't old enough to remember the removal of the bike lanes on Pharmacy and Birchmill, but the pain in the cycling community was heartbreaking. I found a video from 2009 describing how some high school students felt when the lanes were removed. It was surprising that even back then, when the backlash against the lanes were heavy, people still wanted them. And the ironic thing is that the city staff found the traffic impact wasn't even that bad. Drivers grossly overestimated the delay. And even if it was, are a few minutes delay worth innocent lives? It was to councillors. And the bike lanes on Brimley were terrific. Sure, it wasn't the perfect design, but it did its job well. It reduced speeding, it made it safe for residents, it connected 4 major park areas, retail areas, and local schools. It was the biggest expansion in Scarborough cycling network in the center and southwest since 2009, and it could have at least stayed until a permanent design was put in. But the council stripped Scarborough Southwest of the only cycle track it had with no shame. As a cyclist, pedestrian, transit user, and driver, there's no doubt that Scarborough streets are built for speeding. That's how we designed them, and that's what happens. And with each passing death to a vulnerable road user, just thoughts, prayers, victim blaming, or driver blaming, but never considerations to the road design itself. Road diets can cost effectively and efficiently improve safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers on certain corridors. And I think it's at least worth piloting on either Midland, Bellamy, Nielsen, McLevin, McNichol, Topstop Pharmacy, or many other roads. Not all of Scarborough needs the highways to get people where they need to go. Some people think that cycling can't work in Scarborough. Apparently, everyone only drives, or that the few people who take the bus are broke or working class. But of course, behavior is only driven by what viable options are available to residents. If there are no protected bike lanes on major corridors, of course, we won't see the city's modal shift to reduce car trips. Here's my take. City staff needs to rethink the cycling plan in Scarborough immediately. A few routes will not be adequate to make cycling safe, convenient, and go where people want to go. Not to mention, these routes that staff keep talking about that they're planning are decades old, since 2001, like Kingston Road, Brimley Road and Midland Road, and the Warden Hydro Trail. Staff in 2020 planned bike lanes in months and painted them overnight. I also don't want to hear commitments or promises, because we're tired of it and want action. I understand that staff don't always have enough resources, but what's being poured into cycling in the core versus the suburbs is simply unfair. The city should also improve transit and make it safer to cycle on major corridors simultaneously. Maybe build a BRT on Lawrence or Finch with some cycle tracks. Put a bikeway on McCowan to parallel the Scarborough subway, or pave multi-use trails near existing or abandoned rail right-of-ways. There are so many options that don't necessarily degrade transit service, but can complement them. And finally, I want councillors and staff to recognize that they've starved residents, but understand that they have the power to make it better. It's a deep-rooted culture of car obsession and inequity in Scarborough. How it was different before we were one city, but priorities change now. And while areas are progressing and modernizing, other areas are ripping out painted lines because a few drivers whined that their commute was a minute longer. An immediate plan to make a rough grade of north-south and east-west cycle tracks and quick building them would do wonders to improve cycling in Scarborough. And constantly planning for longer-term routes crisscrossing the district will be very important for Toronto to reach its various initiatives and goals and to connect the city overall. I ask that the committee members vote in favor of this item, and I want to thank the members, the chair, and everyone for listening. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you for your deputation. Any questions of the deputant? Councillor Ainsley?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Hafiz, thank you very much for your deputation this morning. Sorry, I missed your age. Are you in high school now, or?
Yes, I'm a grade 12 student, 16 years old.
Okay, great. I really appreciate your time this morning. And you're, I guess you would call yourself an avid cyclist in Scarborough?
Yeah, I would say yeah.
And if you had I know you talked about different things that you would like to see in Scarborough for cycling. What do you think your top three would be?
I would say there should be a sort of, I guess, immediate need for for a few north-south and east-west routes. So, like if you look at Scarborough Street Grid, that like routes like Eglinton, Lawrence, Shepherd, and Finch would be very popular and pretty well to sort of correlate with the density and also transit users, but also corridors that parallel major transit routes, like, you know, like as mentioned in the report, maybe like Kennedy or Victoria Park or Brimley or many other roads, like maybe like Morningside. So I think that specifically, I guess my deputation wasn't specifically about saying what routes needed, but also that the city should look into what routes would work best now and what can be done efficiently and immediately.
Okay. And do you think Scarborough gets a bad rep when it comes to cycling, or that, you know, cycling just doesn't get the priority that it needs?
Oh, absolutely. It's because like there simply isn't any infrastructure at all. So it's like, of course there won't be much cycling.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time this morning. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your presentation. That brings us to our next deputant, Andre Sorensen, the author of the report we're talking about. Do we have Dr. Sorensen online?
To the chair.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for considering our report. Our report is primarily intended to contribute to a more robust and engaged conversation about building active transportation infrastructure and creating a safe multimodal transportation. Not suggesting that the proposed comprehensive network in the report, in the final word, more that the scale of that network is what we should be working toward. And we urge the City of Toronto to develop and approve a long-term plan for a comprehensive active transportation network for Scarborough. The current incremental approach tied to other roadworks is simply not delivering change fast enough. Scarborough has a chicken and egg problem. Dangerous, high-speed arterials discourage walking and cycling, and low numbers of pedestrians and cyclists discourage the city from building better infrastructure. The solution is better active transportation networks, and a long-term plan is essential for achieving that. We believe that everyone in Toronto deserves to live in places where walking and cycling are attractive and safe travel modes, not just in the old City of Toronto downtown. Scarborough presents a major opportunity to create a world-class active transportation network and a more livable city. Automobile-dependent urban transformation difficult, it also makes it much more important to work to change it. Designing our suburbs primarily for car travel was an enormous mistake, and we need to work much harder to correct the errors of the 1950s and 60s planning. Scarborough is currently not a safe or attractive place to walk or cycle, and that must be changed for it to achieve its full potential. Excellent active transportation networks are no longer just nice to have infrastructure, but should.
Sorry, Dr. Sorensen, we just lost you for a second there. Can you repeat that?
I was saying Scarborough is currently not a safe or attractive place to walk or cycle, and that must be changed for it to achieve its full potential. Excellent active transportation networks are no longer just nice to have infrastructure, but should be understood as must-have infrastructure everywhere in the City of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Questions of the deputant. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Professor Sorensen, I really appreciate your time this morning, and I want to thank you for the excellent work that you and your students have done, shining a light on some of the cycling concerns in Scarborough. I guess you've written this paper, Professor, based on Scarborough. Did you look at other areas and say, you know, Scarborough's really lagging behind, say, Etobicoke or the downtown? Like, why did you pick Scarborough?
Well, that's
so we're having some connection issues with you.
This is located. Okay. I actually have a direct.
I apologize for the interruption. This is the host to the speaker. With your permission.
I'm connecting to you.
Sorry, to the speaker. This is the host. With your permission, we'd like to call you into the meeting so that you have a consistent connection.
Okay. Oh, you mean by phone?
Hello?
Hello? Yes, sorry. Can you say a few more words just so that we're getting your audio clear?
Yes, I'm hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can. To Councillor Ainsley, turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, Professor Sorensen, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, perfect. So I was just asking why you and your students decided to look at Scarborough as opposed to other areas of the city, and if being undeveloped for cycling was kind of the main motivation.
Right. I think probably the main reason is that I teach at the University of Toronto Scarborough, and so we're located in Scarborough. So it's something that many of our students live in Scarborough, and in my class we've actually been looking at the implementation of complete streets policies throughout the city. But for this project, we thought it was most important to focus on Scarborough because Scarborough, well, all of the former suburbs of Toronto, including Etobicoke and North York, but particularly Scarborough is a huge area, and that are, compared to the downtown areas, have much less cycling infrastructure, but also in Scarborough in particular, the rate of serious injuries and deaths from collisions is the highest in the city. So it seems to us that it's Scarborough that really needs attention now.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things in your comments was you said one of the keys to this connected network is the city needs to have a long-term plan that's I guess publicly laid out so people can track the development of it and ensure that it's a connected, whatever's in this long-term plan, it's a connected network is my understanding is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's right. That for both walking and cycling trips, the network is really important. Having disconnected bits and pieces of infrastructure is really kind of useless and it is very discouraging for people who want to walk or cycle to, have the whatever infrastructure they're on get stopped by, there's breaks in the network. The complete networks are really important, and it's also for the long run, Scarborough is starting to see significant amounts of redevelopment and intensification. And if we can prepare a long-term plan with the whole network, then those different pieces of redevelopment will be able to relate to where cycle infrastructure will be, where the improved pedestrian networks will be, and can contribute to those, but can also benefit from creating more destinations, more storefronts, more, dentist's office, and other kinds of services that will be linked to the presence of people walking on sidewalks and cycling on cycling networks. And that will help to create a more vibrant, livable, active street networks in Scarborough.
Okay. And I guess, Professor, the other thing that when you're looking at a connected network is we need a standard for staff to follow when they're building. I know that, for example, on Lawrence Avenue, Kingston Road, they have what's, for lack of a better word, a bike route, which is a couple of feet of, there's a white line down the road that a couple of feet off the curb that people are supposed to cycle in. And we just put the route from Kennedy to UTSC, which has a red lane painted, and people are supposed to cycle in it. But I've been told that people, they still get scared because they don't have their own cycling space. So we really need a proper standard as well, I would think you would be advocating for.
Absolutely. And actually, the City of Toronto has an increasingly good best practices around designing cycling infrastructure. The red painted rapid TO lines on Eglinton, Kingston Road and Morningside, I think having an express bus route is really important, but that is not an adequate place for cyclists to ride. So competing with buses is one of the most terrifying things you can do as a cyclist. They will be better when they're all electric, but you know, if you're in traffic competing with a bus and it's going up and around you every block or two, it's scary. They're incredibly noisy and they're a lot bigger than you are. So having a separated bicycle lanes with some sort of a barrier between traffic and where cyclists are is extremely important.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I think I'm at the end of my time for questions.
Thank you. Additional questions
thank
of the
you.
deputant? Okay, I just have a couple quick questions. As you know, we've invited you to give a presentation at Scarborough Community Council next month, so we're looking forward to that. But today we'll be moving to ask staff to come present after you kind of dispositioning your report and reviewing it and saying what's in their plan versus what's not in their plan. So my question is, have your students done any of that work? Did they look at any of the City of Toronto's long-term plans? Because, you know, for example, I know Port Union Road is one in your report, and that one is getting cycling facilities next year. So has any of that work been undertaken yet? How did you look at City of Toronto plans through your work?
Well, we're looking forward to seeing the new updates to the Toronto short-term cycling infrastructure plans, I think, that are coming in December or November. I'm not privy to the ongoing work that's being done, but certainly we realize that there have been some new facilities built and or under construction now. But yeah, I think we looked carefully at the current projects that are under construction and tried, included those in our network proposal. The bigger picture is that idea of making a plan and developing and approving a comprehensive long-term plan, and so that we can have that debate about what's the longer-term future for cycling and pedestrian infrastructure in Scarborough, so that each individual project isn't a subject of, huge battles like what happened with Brimley, which honestly was a disaster. It just really set back the project of making better infrastructure in Scarborough. So I think there is good work being done, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, and we need to be talking about that complete, comprehensive network.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any additional questions of Dr. Swenson? Okay, that brings us to our last speaker, Kevin Rupasinghe with Cycle Toronto. Kevin, are you online? You have 5 minutes.
I am. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, members of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. My name is Kevin Rupasinghe. I'm the campaigns manager with Cycle Toronto. I'm also a local resident of Scarborough, and so this report certainly hits home. This is an excellent report, and it's great to hear from the author just before and the speaker before me as well. And this report, which highlights the opportunity that Scarborough has for making complete streets that work for all road users, and the need that, for us to have a plan to make that happen. Cycle Toronto fully echoes that. For far too long, Scarborough has been left behind in terms of having safe active transportation infrastructure. The report highlights a large percentage of people in Scarborough do not have access to a car, and even more rely on multiple types of transportation, whether walking, cycling, or public transit. It is absolutely overdue that Scarborough has safe and healthy alternatives for people to get around. Now, the report highlights some of the excellent policies that the city does have, which I know you're all very familiar with. The Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, the Complete Streets Guidelines, so that streets are safe for all road users, regardless of age or ability or mode of mobility. The Cycling Network Plan, and of course there's the Climate Action Plan, the Transform TO, which, if we consider one of the goals in Transform TO is that 75% of trips under 5 kilometers need to be walked or cycled by 2050. Well, one of the things that we understand about what it is that gets people to choose to walk or cycle is that they need to feel that it's safe for them to do so. And certainly, as Councillor Ainsley noted before, there's concerns about having just paint on streets like Kingston or Lawrence. It's important that we build protected, because we know for the majority of people, that's what's going to make them feel safe enough to actually choose to ride a bike. I would like to highlight, though, that despite these excellent policies, there are still many missed opportunities in Scarborough, where we have had opportunities for the city's policies to be enacted through the construction, through various construction projects, road reconstructions or resurfacings, and it hasn't happened. A few that come to mind are, if you look at Midland Avenue from Danforth to Lawrence, that was redone just a couple of years ago, and that shows up in our bike plan. It was a great opportunity to incorporate Vision Zero and Complete Streets Guidelines, and it was a missed opportunity. Kingston Road east of Morningside very recently was redone, and that was another missed opportunity. Certainly shows up in our bike plan. Danforth Road up just south of St. Clair. Milner, Pharmacy, even Birchmount, a street that formerly had bikeways on it, was reconstructed, and it continues to be. These projects continue to be rolled out with plenty of missed opportunities to actually include cycling infrastructure. And so how can it be, despite having these policies for Vision Zero and for Complete Streets and for Climate Action Plan, that routes that show up in our cycling network plan, that these are just not a priority to be upgraded? It's not always that this happens. I know Port Union was pointed out earlier. Of course, parts of Steeles where near Milliken Go are being upgraded. And of course, the Huntingwood Active TO Bikeway is another example of a street where we've been able to do something, and at some point in the coming months or years, there'll be a chance to upgrade it. This is the exception, though. It's not the rule. There's clearly a gap between policy and implementation. And, when we think of the opportunity that these reconstructions provide, when we want to hit our Transform TO goals of having 75% of trips walked or cycled by 2050, well, these streets won't be up for reconstruction for well past that deadline. So we've missed those opportunities, and they're gone. And so what we really want to see is, of course, as the report echoes, it's critical that a strong plan is adopted that points to a clear network. We also really want to see some robust mechanisms that are in place so that we ensure that when the city is proceeding on these projects, that there are no longer these missed opportunities where our policies don't actually match with what's happening on the ground. I understand this is coming up again in November and in December, and I hope those will be opportunities for us to put those robust mechanisms in place, as well as a clear plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your deputation. Any questions of the deputant? Councillor Ainsley, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Kevin, it's great to hear from you again. Thank you for your time this morning. I wanted to ask you, when we look at the grid of cycle lanes and walking paths and intersections on arterial roads, or we have our off-road cycle network in Scarborough. Do you think one's more important than the other, or they're both as important, or what would you say?
So I think in terms of cycling for transportation, most of the on-road network is the most critical, right? In terms of where do people live, where do people want to shop, or where do they go to school, where do they work? All of that is just as if you're riding the bus, just as if you're driving, and just as if you're walking somewhere. Those are where many of those major destinations are. I think the off-road network is also very important in terms of recreation, and it can provide really comfortable routes. And I think we also know there's a lot of challenges with getting the off-road network built as quickly as we'd like. So I think from Cycle Toronto's perspective, certainly the on-road network is a priority and represents the biggest opportunity that we have.
Okay. And then from Cycle Toronto's perspective, if you had a wish list of the top 3 things that you would like to see done for cycling in Scarborough, what would that be?
Well, I think certainly, as the report highlights, having a clear plan is important. We've seen bits and pieces sort of get proposed and put forward, and I think that, as the report highlights, is not an appropriate way to proceed. So certainly a good plan. One of the things we also would like to see, and this applies citywide, not just in Scarborough, is, as I'd suggested, some of these missed opportunities. If we have a complete streets guideline, if we have a Vision Zero policy and a bike plan, there should be no street that gets reconstructed that does not include complete streets elements, right? That does not include a protected bikeway. It's astonishing that that's something that can come forward despite council directions and policies, and it just gets built, exactly the way it was or would have been 50 years ago, maybe with some slight improvements. So I think that's sort of another key thing that we would want to see, that if we are rebuilding a road or resurfacing a road, or as a transit project or whatever it might be, that would include protected bikeways and other complete streets and Vision Zero elements. That should become the rule, not the exception. And so that would certainly support Scarborough and project citywide. And then I guess third is building the complete streets infrastructure on the roads is critical. I think we also need to see this paired with things like secure bike parking, bike share, programs for apartments and other destinations to start building a bike culture and to address all the barriers that are there, right? It's important that people feel safe in order to get from A to B, but I think we'd want to see clear investment in things like bike share and bike parking so that people can continue to choose to ride even once that infrastructure is built.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate your time this morning. Those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Any additional questions of the deputants? Okay. Questions of staff? Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the first thing that I wanted to ask about was the types of bike lane construction that are done in Scarborough. And the example that I used in my questions, the red lines that were done from Kennedy Station to UTSC, people have to ride in those, but they also have to share them with TTC buses and taxi cabs. And then there's other areas where Kingston Road, for example, was repaved, and there was a small area that was delineated on the closest to the curb with a white line with about 1.5 feet where you're supposed to ride a bike. And I'm trying to understand from staff's perspective what the standard or best practice is for building bicycling infrastructure on arterial roads.
Through the chair to Councillor Ainsley, I get started, and if I miss anything, I'm sure Jacqueline will hop in. But we have a number of different approaches that we take to implementing bike infrastructure on road. I'll start with the red lanes, which is the first time we've done transit BRT style transit lane with red markings, which are principally for the fast and frequent access of transit vehicles to mark that space. When we brought that project here, the Eglinton Corridor project here to council, we had a discussion about the ability to allow cyclists in that space because we believe that there was enough space to do so. And while I understand and appreciate the comments about sharing a lane with buses, it's a practice that's used in other jurisdictions, and so we all agreed to allow that to happen. And as we go through the Rapid TO program, we'll continue to evaluate that. With the other approaches that are used, we keep our eyes constantly on best practices. Some of what we do is impacted by the ability to have space out there, or whether we are reconstructing a road or just adding a temporary or a more immediate solution. So for a more immediate solution, it might be curbstones and verticals. It might be a stripe on the roadway where we have a conflict point. Especially through intersections, we will often use, or approaching intersections, we will always often use green paint with markings as well. And then when we do a reconstruction, and I think we all feel pretty strongly about the fact that when you have corridors that are wider with multiple lanes, I think it was Kevin, the deputy, who spoke about having separated cycling facilities as being so critical and important. And so we do take advantage of the opportunity to, when we do reconstructions, to build separated cycling infrastructure that is considered a cycle track, right? And so we try to make that that complete streets improvement. I think we have catch up to do on that, quite frankly. I think our complete streets policies have been in place for a few years now, and the implementation of them through the process of our capital improvements is still in its early stages, but we are working very diligently to make sure that those reviews happen. And when we bring those projects back to council, as you know, we have to come back with a full accounting of public engagement, which will have a report in December that articulates our 2022 program, having come with the initial plan for 3 years, then gone out to the community for engagement, then come back to council with that response and our design approaches moving forward. That was a long answer, Councillor.
That's okay. I asked a long question.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to ask about, Barbara, when it comes to collisions in an intersection, I guess we're focusing on cyclists today. How do your staff interact with the Toronto Police when it comes to collisions with bicyclists when you're trying to determine infrastructure? Is there any dialogue back and forth where you get a report from the police on an annual or semi-annual basis saying, you know, and I'm going to use the worst example lately at Birch Mountain Danforth, that, you know, we had 40 collisions in this intersection, X number were with cyclists. We're giving you this report for your information to see if there's something that the city could do to improve Danforth Avenue or a particular intersection.
Through the chair, we have constant contact with the police on Vision Zero and safety. It's a pretty broad program, and we do get every incident report that they put together. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but a summary of the incident routinely, like the next day or the day of. So we have constant information with them. We also use our data on Vision Zero crashes, near misses, to inform where the police patrols happen. As you know, we fund a couple of dedicated teams of police officers to the traffic unit that go out and specifically focus on speeding and Vision Zero. They are informed by data that the Transportation Division collects on high incidences of speeding or crashes, and that's how they direct a good portion of their program. We also do a vulnerable road users review when we go out after a tragedy has happened. The team goes out and does an assessment of that intersection. There's often some things that need to be taken care of, some of which are transportation related, others of which might be related to enforcement or information about that location that might be of value to the police. So we're in touch with them constantly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gray. I think I'm at the end of my time. Thank you.
Yes, you are. Okay, additional questions, staff? Okay, seeing none, speakers on this item. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin by thanking Professor Sorensen and his students for putting this report together and giving what I think is a pretty comprehensive overview of cycling in Scarborough and some of the deficiencies that we're trying to deal with. As a person that cycles, I get my daily walks in. I've been able to see firsthand some of the concerns and in person some of the deficiencies that are outlined in this report. I'm looking forward to the work that city staff are going to do on this. I think we need to continue to break down silos when it comes to cycling in Scarborough. It took me years of advocating to the Toronto Parking Authority to get bike share TO to put cycling stations in Scarborough. They finally put cycling stations in the southeast corner of Scarborough. In myself and Councillor McKelvey's ward. I think they're in Councillor Thompson's ward now as well. But that took years. And part of the mindset with Bike Share TO was they said, that it wasn't a connected network, that putting bike share stations in southeast corner of Scarborough didn't connect to the rest of the network, even though I had letters of support from the University of Toronto Scarborough, Centennial College, both school boards, Metrolinx, all offering to put bike stations and their respective properties. First Capital Realty, which owns a number of businesses and plazas. So, there was an opportunity there, and we got a pilot project finally. When it comes to cycling, actually, I go out for a walk almost every day. And more often than not, I see somebody cycling on the sidewalks. And if I have an opportunity, I can stop them and say, what are you doing riding your bike on a sidewalk? And 99.9% of the time, people say to me, I wouldn't ride a bike out there. The huge risk that I'm putting myself at of riding a bike in Scarborough on a road, I wouldn't do it. So I feel safer on a sidewalk. So I'm riding on a sidewalk. We put bike lanes in on Eglinton, Kingston Road, Morningside, from Kennedy subway station to UTSC. And it's the same thing. It's not, you share that red painted lane with a TTC bus. And the reason that those buses, the red painted lanes are there is the high volume of TTC buses. We were trying to get more people that were being held up by motor vehicles from point A to point B. So cyclists are encouraged to use those red lanes, but have to share it with a bike. The other thing that I often see more often than not, and I'm sure it happens in other parts of the city, but I witness it firsthand as well, and I call it the Scarborough sidewalk slide, where you approach the intersection either on a bicycle or by foot. Motorists often will, I call it, slowly ease into the side, into a crosswalk. They only look one way. They look for oncoming traffic. They don't seem to look for pedestrians. They don't seem to look for cyclists. And I think that's a huge issue that needs to be dealt with. I think we need a long-term cycling plan. I think there's benchmarking that needs to be done. A long-term cycling plan that's laid out in public so that people can see when it's being done, when it's getting behind, and moving it forward in a long-range term, cohesive manner. So I'm asking members of the committee to support the recommendations before us today, and to see this included with the work that staff are doing. And I look forward to a much more comprehensive cycling plan that can be publicly viewed for Scarborough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Additional speakers on the item? Okay, I have an amendment that I've vetted with Councillor Ainsley. It's just streamlining this with what we also have happening at Scarborough Community Council. So this is asking for a presentation back from city staff that dispositions the report, goes through their plans, but also reports back on what's happening in conjunction with next month's cycling network meeting. Thank you to Dr. Sorensen for coming today. We look forward to seeing you at Scarborough Community Council as well. With that, I'm hopeful you'll support this amendment. So we'll move to any other speakers on this item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed, that item carries. Councillor Ainsley, saw your hand up, but nice try. It doesn't count. Okay, that brings us to IE 25.22, improving cycling and pedestrian safety on the York Beltline Trail and Kay Gardner Beltline Trail. We have one speaker, Tom Worrell. Tom, are you here?
Madam Chair, just so you know, I was there as well, and I realized at the last second that my video was off, so I just wanted to make sure that you actually saw me as well. Okay.
Thank you. I was madly texting people saying, turn your cameras on, but I didn't have yours to ask you. Okay, great. So the next item is IE 2522. Do we have Tom online?
Yes.
Hi, Tom. You have 5 minutes.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. My name is Tom Worrell, and I am a member of Cycle Toronto Midtown and frequent user of the Beltline Trail, both as a pedestrian and a cyclist. I have been using various portions of this trail for commuting and recreation for many, many years. I am speaking in support of Councillor Cole's motion to improve pedestrian and cycling safety on the Beltline trails. This trail, or linear park if you wish, forms an important east-west connectivity in our community as it travels through several unique neighborhoods. The trail is very accessible to all users. It's located in the very heart of Midtown, has many access points. It's flat and wide and provides a generous tree canopy. It's a one-of-a-kind space that we are fortunate to have in Midtown. Its use continues to increase each year as our city continues to grow, and the need for recreational space and safe cycling routes is increasingly necessary. The path is used by people of all ages and abilities, including new parents and caregivers with strollers and wheelchairs, young children and seniors, and crossing busy streets such as Oriole Parkway, Bathurst, Old Park Road, Ronald, and Caledonia pose significant safety risks to everyone who wishes to cross these streets. The path is in immediate need of upgrades. Many recommendations have been documented over the years, but very little has been accomplished so far. A recent safety audit on the trail took place with Councillor Cole, Al Rozovsky, Manager Ward 6, 8, and 15, and 4 members of Cycle Toronto, including myself. We identified several recommendations that are itemized in Councillor Cole's motion that we would like to see implemented. It's time to act on these recommendations to provide a safer and welcoming experience to the Beltline Trail for the citizens of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation. Any questions of deputant? Okay, seeing none, questions of staff? Seeing none, speakers or questions, Councillor Cole?
I'll just speak.
Okay. Before we do that, I'm just going to move a quick motion to extend. I know I wanted to finish promptly at 12:30, but I think we can finish by about 12:35. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, and that way we don't have to come back at 1:30. We'll just display and vote on that. Yep, it's okay. We're good. All those in favor of extending? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Cole, speak. 5 minutes.
Yes, and if you want to put up my my motion there, is that possible?
Yes, they'll pull it up.
Okay, as the deputant Tom Worrell stated, this is a very unique asset the city has. So we don't have to build anything, we don't have to acquire land, we don't have to fight off industrialization. This Beltline trail is there, and as a result of the foresight of a former councillor, Kay Gardner, former Metro Chairman Alan Tonks, and others, we were able to reinvent this abandoned rail line. Those of you who know a little bit about Toronto history, there were rail lines throughout the city of Toronto. They were built at the turn of the century, and this is one of them. So this was turned into a linear park, and this linear park is already in existence, and it really goes, it's about 10 kilometers. It goes from Caledonia to the west, all the way down to Mount Pleasant and into Mount Pleasant Cemetery. So it's a real oasis for people who want to walk, want to take a stroll, want to bring their children in their carriages, people of all ages. It's extremely well used, and by cyclists and runners, joggers. I've been jogging it for years. I don't want to say how many, but anyways, so it's a beautiful place. It's tree covered in the summer. It's cool. It's air conditioned at no cost, and there's been big improvements in the West End and the York Line area where city park staff keep it impeccably clean. We have little miniature parks abutting the Belt Line in the west, and this park is really an east-west connector through the middle of the city. I mean, you don't want to risk your life and walk or cycle on Eglinton. Believe me, don't do it. Don't try it because of the construction hell we've had there for the last 20 years. So people have to find a place to either walk, jog, or cycle. So they go up to the Beltline Trail. It is a very important mode of transportation and recreation. And especially during COVID, I've noticed there's been almost a doubling and tripling of the number of people that have been using this trail. And that's the reason for the urgency of we've had requests to improve some safety accessibility features of this trail over the last 3 years. And I'm just putting forth this motion so we can get moving on these minor safety enhancements that are long overdue. You know, things like simple curb cuts, because this trail intersects roads like Caledonia, Ronald Avenue, Old Park Road. And whether you're a cyclist or a person that is in a wheelchair, whatever, you can't get from one section of the trail to the other because the curb cuts are not there. And so, I mean, this even violates the Ontario's with Disabilities Act, where we should have these curb cuts there. And then when you get into the section of the trail, there'll be all kinds of obstructions. There'll be these garbage bins, city garbage bins in the way. There'll be post signs. And so if it's at dusk or you're visually challenged, you're going to run into one of these posts on a regular basis, as they do at Roselawn and the Allen, where the Beltline Trail hits a Berlin Wall. There's a massive wall there with no wayfinding. So people that go on the Kay Gardner, they don't realize there's another 5-kilometer trail on the other side of the Allen, but there's no signage there. And then if you try to find your way around the Berlin Wall and the Allen Road, you have to risk your life on a very busy street called Roselawn, Elmridge, which has got potholes, and God forbid you should try and navigate that. So we've listed a series of minor improvements that are critical for safe usage of this trail. And it shouldn't be something that should take 3 years. We need to improve the safety, the access, so that people, whether you're walking, cycling, running, whatever you're doing, you can use this great city asset safely. And we got to do it today, not wait another 3 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cole. Any additional speakers on this item? Okay, seeing none, I just have a friendly amendment that I've circulated with Councillor Cole. We can display that and vote on that. It's just giving staff a little bit more time, because I'd rather they took time and gave you a really fulsome, good report back on what you want, rather than rush to get it to the next infrastructure meeting, just because the agenda...
God forbid they should rush. God forbid they should rush.
Well, I mean, we want them to rush in terms of getting to you at a reasonable amount of time, but I want a quality report as well. And we're also adding in the general manager transportation services, just recognizing the next agenda closes. Reports are finished for that in about 10 days, so I'd rather they spent a little bit more time on it. Okay, if there's no other speakers, we'll move to a vote on this item. Yeah, just waiting on screen change. Okay, vote on the amended timeline. All those in favor? All those opposed, that carries. Vote on the item as amended. Councillor Cole's recommendations. All those in favor? All those opposed, that item carries. Thank you, Councillor Cole, for that great work in that area. Okay, that brings us to our last item, which is IE 2524. Thank you. Councillor Perruzza, are there any questions of this item? Okay, questions of staff? Okay, I have a question for the mover, Councillor Perruzza. I'm just wondering if, again, you would see it as a friendly amendment to, instead of say January 2021, to say Q1 2022, just so that there's time for staff to prepare a more fulsome report for you that gives you a quality report of what you're looking for. Are you okay with that timeline instead, that minor amendment?
Chair, I'd like, hi, it's you're calling me, right?
Yeah. Hi, Councillor Perruzza. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I'll tell you why I don't want to add Q1, because I've asked for this before, right? And it's like it just, I know that the staff has worked and they got a lot of reports on the go and stuff like that, but this is like really important. And I think they get it. So I'd like to, to keep it to January if I can. It's not a big deal. I think that they got already done because I've asked for something similar in the past.
Okay. Anybody else questions of staff or speak to the item?
Can you hear me or no?
We can hear you. Did you want to speak to the item? We can't hear you now.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
This is the one on the laneways now, correct? Hello?
Hi, yes.
Can you hear, Madam Chair?
Hello, to Councillor Perruzza, this is the host. If we could please have you turn off your camera.
Hello?
Hello, Councillor Perruzza, this is the host. If we could please have you turn off your camera.
Yeah. Turn off the camera, sure. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you better. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Yeah, Madam Chair. I mean, it's relatively self-explanatory. Some of the suburban neighborhoods, and they're not all over, but in some cases, some of these subdivisions were built where the developers kind of carved out these laneways to connect different streets. And I'm speaking to my ward now, and I know that there are similar and somewhat different situations throughout the city of Toronto. But in mine, you have these laneways that connect these sort of streets, and primarily I think they were created, to sort of, take kids. To allow kids to be able to walk to school and shorten their routes so that they wouldn't have to walk around streets and so on. So these laneways for a long time, to some degree, were abandoned in the sense that not a lot of people were using them because, as you know, not very many kids walk to school anymore. They're mostly get driven by their parents. But as a result of COVID, and with people walking through their neighborhoods a lot more and using sort of their public streets and laneways a lot more, there's been a lot more active use. But as you can see by the photographs that I added to the motion, and I don't know if the members have the photographs. As you can see, that some of these laneways have really sort of are really run down, and they're in very, very shoddy condition. And we're getting a lot of complaints about them, and rightfully so, because they exist, they're public. They invite people to use them, and then our maintenance has fallen behind on these things. So the motion is somewhat self-explanatory. It just sort of seeks for some kind of a program where we have a little more certainty about how these walkways are maintained in a safe and decent standard for people to be able to use. And I'm hoping that the members will support it. Just simply a report request to have these things taken care of. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. All those in favor of Councillor Perruzza's item? All those opposed? That item carries. That concludes our business today. Thank you. See you next month.